All right, let's go ahead and see what happens there. Let's know. We had a little bit of a change here in the setup. Just need to double check some of those output configurations. So let's see how that's going along. Apologies for that, but let's go ahead and get things started here and see who we have joining us today on the stream. So we got Tom joining us. Fantastic. We've got Deviant Bills joining us. Emily Love joining us. Liquid House. Kenichi. E-Rock on deck, man. Snef Computer Design. Edwin joining us. Looks like we've got a full house joining us ultimately to be able to take a look at these latest generation based motherboards. So very, very exciting. Hey, Real Love, Sue Min, fantastic. So let's get ready to go ahead and jump straight into it, guys. We've got a lot to jump into regarding not only new motherboards, but also giving you guys some insights resident to the new platform, the new CPUs, the new architecture, and of course, all of the awesome features and functions that we're bringing to the table. So let's get ready to go ahead and jump into it right off the bat. So I think the first thing is let's quickly just go ahead and give you a little bit of a flyover of the series of motherboards that we're going to be touching on in today's stream. All right. And we will pretty much dive into all of the specific models. Keep in mind that this is not the full kind of performance-based embargo. Generally, we usually have kind of a focused live stream where we'll do kind of maybe some hands-on overclocking, dive into the UEFI, show you some actual feature and function demonstration. This is an early first look preview, so we're definitely going to be able to talk about all the boards respectively, talk about the majority of the specifications and the feature sets that the boards are going to bring to the table, help you understand which might be the board that you're going to want to get into. But we will have a follow-up launch live stream which will come closer towards the end of the month, where we can actually go in and do some performance testing and show you off some additional stuff that I think you guys will find out will be quite exciting. Okay, so with that, let's go ahead and quickly take a look at the series of boards that we're going to be coming to market with. So first off is going to be our Prime series. We're actually going to have two models here that are going to be specific of focus with the Prime Z890-P Wi-Fi, and then also a micro ATX offering with the Z890M plus Wi-Fi. All right, moving from there, we're going to have TUF Gaming series. And for this new generation of motherboards, it's really exciting that we're actually going to be offering both a white and a black variant. So this is the first time that we've offered this for the TUF Gaming lineup outside of the BTF-based limited edition run that we did in the prior Z790 based chipset refresh. So you're going to have two options available to you with the Pro and with the Plus, and we will talk about what are going to be those differences outside, of course, the aesthetic. But I'd love to know in your comment, what do you already think about the brand new TUF Gaming board in white? I think it looks absolutely fantastic, but I also really love the new vector design language that we have in place with the TUF Gaming series of boards. Moving into the next lineup, we're going to have our ROG Strix series. So this is really the sweet spot for a lot of the enthusiasts that are out there. We, of course, have a board in the white aesthetic as well, which has been the ever popular and the ever present Dash A model. This is really going to be a great foundation for those of you looking for those bold and bright builds. And then we've got the Dash F, which tends to be really kind of in that sweet spot of the market where a lot of features, a lot of function, a lot of really nice specifications in terms of the number of ports that a lot of users like without necessarily jumping into the Dash E or even to the Hero class. Speaking of the Dash E though, I mean, just look at the sheer number of USB ports that are on this board. 4, 8, 12, right? And then 2 more down at the bottom, right? That's just absolutely insane in terms of the level of connectivity that this board brings to the table. That might maybe be my pick of the overall show, but the Hero is really setting a brand new benchmark to, I think, again, really solidify itself as the absolute best-in-class premium enthusiast motherboard. But of course, as you guys know, when we're talking about ROG, Strix is not where we talk about our flagship level product, but it is going to be, of course, the Maximus series. And so we're going to be touching that in a moment, but we can't forget about ProArt. It's one of my absolute favorite series of boards that we have. I think they're absolutely fantastic. You can see we've gone ahead and continue to maintain that really beautiful, clean, monochromatic design ID, along with just a little bit of that gold accents that's prayer. And now, of course, we're even fleshing it out where we've got the upcoming PA602 in wood. We, of course, have the motherboard, the new recently launched LC360 AIO, and then, of course, ProArt series-based graphics cards, a great foundation for those of you that are maybe going to be focusing maybe on prosumer professional type workflows, or maybe just looking for something that's much more on that minimal vibe, right? And still going to be a fantastic series of products for gamers. And last but not least, of course, we have the flagship series of products that we're going to talk about, which is going to be the Maximus series of motherboards. So you can see there we've got an Extreme, we've got an Apex, and we've got the Hero. And these boards are going to be absolutely just packed in terms of features, functions, and specifications. I'm going to give you a little bit of a teaser. Just alone, the Hero, it has 6, that's right, 6 M.2 slots on this motherboard. It is absolutely stacked in terms of its features and functions and specifications. But again, 6 slots, and it also introduces slim SAS connectivity. That means that you could literally install a 30 to 60 terabyte 2.5-inch PCIe NVMe M.2 SSD off of a single slot on this board, because with that slim SAS connector, you don't essentially have to utilize multiple slots with multiple M.2 drives to be able to get to these large density configurations. So the Hero is going to keep bringing it in terms of offering just some really awesome features and functions and specs, but there's a lot more to talk about. Here, we're just priming you to let you know these are the boards we're going to be jumping into. And I'd love to know which one was your favorite so far of what you've seen. And we'll jump into that. So let's quickly see a little bit of commentary that we have from the community. And we're going to see. Justin Chu, again, one of the best builders and modders out there in the game, notes that he already has gone ahead and ordered his Extreme this morning. So I do believe that actually pre-orders are live, guys. So if we have somebody from our team in the chat, we can go ahead and drop the link in there and see if a moment, if I can, I'll go ahead and drop it in there as well. Somebody asking about ITX or micro ATX. No, we got you covered. Actually, in the very beginning, there is a micro ATX board under the Prime series, and there is an ROG Strix-I model that we are going to have. So rest assured, it doesn't matter whether you're talking about ATX, whether you're talking about micro ATX or you're talking about mini ITX, we've got a board for you. So no worries on that side. One of my absolute favorite builders and modders in the games, I consider him a true masterclass builder, Sneff Computer Design, notes that the Extreme and the Apex are my favorites. Well, that Extreme with that 5-inch display, right? It is truly a stunning board, and definitely that Apex is just next level, being bold and bright, and of course just built for performance, right? So absolutely fantastic choices there. We're going to see one more from DePoets, another fantastic creator out there. If you guys aren't following him on his socials, make sure to go ahead and do that. But DePoet says, I need to get that ProArt style wood case for my next build. Pair that up, of course, with a ProArt based motherboard, which has got 10G, because I know he loves his 10G based connectivity, and I definitely think that that would be a great pairing. So let's get ready to go ahead and jump in some of the base item and informations on the Z890 base chipset. We're going to talk a little bit about the CPUs, and then we're going to talk about the base minimum specifications that you can expect across all of these motherboards. And then we're going to jump into the actual boards themselves. Quickly, somebody's asking, are these boards able to be overclocked? So yes, there is going to be overclocking support on Z890, as well as with these latest generation based CPUs that we're going to be talking about. We can't talk about any specific frequency targets or actually do any demos, but rest assured, we're going to dive into that not only in our PCDIY community, which you can actually find out more by checking out the link in the description, but in a future live stream towards the end of the month, we'll have actually a focused kind of overclocking session where we're going to dive into DRAM overclocking, CPU overclocking. There's a lot of really cool technologies and features that have been introduced specifically for this new architecture that are quite cool, and some really cool stuff that we've done, of course, in terms of evolving AIOC and DRAM overclocking to make it friendlier, easier, and just more comprehensive in terms of the level of options they have available to you. So definitely, if you care about overclocking, you're going to be covered. So let's get ready to jump into I think first an introduction to the actual Z890 chipset. You know, for the majority of you that are out there, you generally are not going to be, of course, upgrading from generation to generation. I'd love to know right now in the chat, let me know, what platform are you running? Are you running, you know, maybe Z590, Z490, X299, X99? Are you maybe on an older AMD platform, maybe B450, X470, right? I think in one of our last streams, somebody told me that they were still running an X99 based platform, right? So depending on what you're coming from, I think it's always important to kind of get a sense of what is that chipset going to be affording you? What are some of the base requirements that the chipset does require in terms of if you are going to be considering it, right? And then from there, we'll also move into kind of, like I said, the minimum specifications that you'd be able to have on any one of the boards that we're talking about. So first and foremost, let's go ahead and bring up what we call a chipset block. So the chipset blocks is going to give us a good breakdown in terms of understanding what we're going to have. So as we noted here, we have the 800 series based chipset. So this is going to be introducing support really as a big focus point for PCI Express Gen 5. You had PCI Express Gen 5 previously, but it wasn't necessarily unilaterally present on pretty much all boards. And that's going to be one of the great minimum specifications you're going to get. You're going to get PCI Express Gen 5 not only for your by 16 base graphics, but all the boards will have at least one PCI Express Gen 5 M.2 SSD slot. So if you're looking to be able to have the, of course, highest level of throughput and bandwidth for those highest speed based storage devices, as well as, of course, for adding cards, then you're going to be good to go. Now, keep in mind that no current GPU solution utilizes PCI Express Gen 5. Even something like a flagship 4090 product is only going to use PCI Express Gen 4. And even then, it's actually not constrained even by operating at by 8 in terms of its link speed. So there's actually flexibility to even sometimes take away lanes and then maybe use that for other types of devices, or maybe for more of those M.2 slots that we talked about a little bit earlier on some of the motherboards. But again, that is going to be something to keep in mind. There's also going to be a change in terms of the memory specification support. So of course, in the prior generation for Z690, Z790, you did have options between DDR4 and DDR5, but DDR5 offers much greater density, greater bandwidth, and overall better efficiency. And really, it is the future. It has been quite solidified, not only in terms of, I think, reaching good maturity, solid pricing, but a lot of choice, regardless of whether you want to go with really big, dense configurations like, 96, 128, or even 256 gigabyte configurations, or maybe something more in line with kind of what a gamer would generally target, which would probably be like 32 to maybe 48 gigabytes for kind of more of your enthusiast-based builds. There is going to be an upgrade in terms of the DRAM memory specification support. So the default operating memory profile for this generation is actually 6400 MT. That's an upgrade compared to the prior generation. Again, this is going to be important if you want to run maybe at a stock level and you don't want to do any overclocking. But definitely, if we do talk about overclocking for the memory for this platform, you can expect really impressive results. Again, we can't go into all the details, but I can tell you that the brand new memory controller that Intel has designed for this generation, along with support for a new type of memory, which is actually called a CUDIM, not a standard UDIM. These DIMMs right here are standard UDIMs, but these motherboards and the CPUs support actually a new standard called CDIM. And we'll talk a little bit more about what makes that unique, but it will really introduce a much higher level of DDR5 scaling and also consistency across a wider range of motherboards, which is pretty exciting. So that is something to also go ahead and note. Of course, you have the brand new microarchitecture within the CPUs itself, and this also introduces things like the MPU, which is now going to be present, high-speed connectivity in terms of that pretty much all of the boards, even the entry-level solutions, will have access to 40 gigabits Thunderbolt 4 connectivity, and we'll even have some models like the, of course, flagship Extreme board, which actually will come with Thunderbolt 5, right? Offering an entirely just next level of throughput and performance. And then, of course, when we talk about generalized standard connectivity, you can expect high speed in terms of 5 to 10 gigabits to 20 gigabits USB connectivity. All the boards will featuring some form of Wi-Fi 7 on them, so not even any having Wi-Fi 6 or Wi-Fi 6E. So that gives you a little bit of a baseline in terms of what you can expect from the chipset specification. I will note one last item as well on the memory slide. I'm going to bring up one other piece of information. For some of you that might be running maybe more of a professional workflow, you might be interested to know that now Intel is actually formalizing support from the memory controller side to be able to support ECC memory. At this time, I can't confirm for you whether or not we have ECC memory support for any of the boards that we're going to touch on, but make sure to stay tuned for more information in that respect. But it is a change for this generation. The memory controller essentially supports now standard UDIMs, it supports CUDIMs, and it also supports ECC-based memory. Okay. All right, let's quickly just see if we have any quick questions there. If not, we're going to touch quickly, I think, on the CPUs and then get ready to get into the minimum set of specifications you can expect on ASUS Z890 series of motherboards. Hey, Pello, happy to have you here. Thanks for joining us here on the stream. So John lets us know that he's running a B450 system for his racing sim. So definitely that is quite a bit of an older platform. You're definitely going to be running older in terms of not talking about, you definitely don't have something like Wi-Fi 6E or Wi-Fi 7. You don't have the higher speed PCI Express Gen 5 support. You have a little bit lower CPU frequencies. So that would be a pretty nice bump. Even if you were to go to the most entry offering that we're going to have, it would be a sizable uplift in terms of performance and connectivity and overall a platform experience. So that's actually interesting. Another user also is on B450 as well. Vinny notes, hey, ASUS ROG is awesome, man. Well, fantastic. You're awesome. Thank you for joining us here on the stream. Great to have you here. And Somebody asking actually about the Ryujin 3 Extreme. We're going to be talking about it a little bit later in the stream, but it will be closer to probably, I'd say, the very end of this month, probably next month in terms of actually the availability. Rest assured, if you're part of our PCDIY community, watching our weekly streams, watching, of course, our social media channels, we're going to let you know as soon as it's available if you want to be able to get that flagship cooler. And as I did note, I am going to be going hands-on and showing you a little bit more about what makes this cooler so cool. All right. Pun intended. Okay. All right. So let's get ready to go ahead and jump into it right here. So let's go into, I think, yeah, CPU, I think information. So let's go ahead and quickly take a look at that CPU side just for reference for you guys. Some of you might be wondering what CPUs you're going to be having, right? And so when we talk about, of course, all of our boards, you can expect to be confident in terms of their overall interoperability, compatibility, and performance. Regardless of the model you pick, whether you run them stock or overclock, you're not going to have any concerns. As we move up, of course, the boards will have more performant VRM designs, which will just allow for greater efficiency. Sometimes on some edge cases, it can help to stabilize more aggressive based overclock parameters. But the reality is here we can see the lineup as what it's going to be available for you to be able to kind of pick from. So you have your new naming designation, of course, with Intel Core Ultra. And you can see right there, you've got a 9, a 7, a 7, a 5, and a 5, right? And again, K helps to denote that overclocking support as we would normally expect. There is, of course, a bit of a change from the architectural side, which means that we no longer have SMT, so we don't have that hyperthreading. So pretty much you have one-to-one alignment in terms of what you see from the cores to the thread count. But then you'll also note there's some nice inclusions that we have with things like the NPU integration, which is now a first for the desktop platform. This is something that we saw, take for instance, like in our mini PC solutions, such as like our NUC 14 Pro models, or of course, like in our laptops, but it's now the first time that Intel is now integrating that NPU into the desktop side. And we got some pretty cool stuff that allows us to even actually overclock the NPU for this generation. So yeah, stay tuned for that. New enhanced, of course, Intel Arc graphics engine, which will also be available along with their advanced media engine. So even if you're going to run a discrete GPU, you're going to have a really robust and very performant-based media engine along with the graphics engine built into the CPU, which is always nice, right? And then there's also a bit of a tweak, I'd say, in terms of the overall CPU frequencies. Now, of course, Intel hasn't disclosed all of the information as of yet because there's still a performance embargo in place, but this gives you at least a relative baseline in terms of what you can expect. And I will talk about some of the cool things that are on the CPU architectural side that align with what we've designed on the motherboard side that allow for actually a very, very advanced degree of granularity and control that we haven't seen before. One specific instance is that in the past, when you used to approach overclocking, you would generally have an interval target of about 100 megahertz that was that essentially you could define. We now actually have approximately about a 16 megahertz interval. And this will actually allow you to have more granularity, more leeway in terms of how you approach overclocking. So that as you want to kind of keep bumping that frequency up, if maybe you couldn't get in that extra 100 megahertz bin, you actually might be able to now just drop in that 16 megahertz bin, or 2 16 megahertz bin, or 3 16 megahertz bins to be able to actually extend the granularity of the overclocking margin that's built in. So there's some pretty cool stuff that they have. It gets pretty nitty and gritty, but some cool stuff that we'll dive into a little bit later when we talk a bit more about overclocking. But this gives you at least a baseline resident to the CPU. What's going to be your guys's go-to CPU? Which one you think you're going to pair? Although I think probably if you buy something like a Hero class, you're probably at a minimum going to be looking at probably something like that 265K or that 285, right? Okay, so let's get ready to jump into our minimum set of specifications here that you can expect on our motherboards. So give me one moment to bring this up here. And okay, perfect. Let's do this here. And quickly see if we got any quick questions that might have come up right there. Somebody notes right here is that the 16.67 megahertz steps is cool for sure. Definitely, if you're somebody that's an overclocker, this is actually pretty cool that they've implemented this type of granularity. There's actually also been changes to what they're allowing for in terms of how you can define actually the voltage per each core. So there's even not only more granularity in terms of the frequency approach, but actually in terms of how voltage can be applied to the cores, just allowing you to have just more granularity and control in terms of how you can pursue your overclocking and ultimately be able to get just better results. But I think anytime you have this type of granularity, it's always really cool to see. Okay. Um, Okay, no worries on that side. Keep dropping your questions in there. I'll go ahead and see if I can answer them as we're kind of going through the stream. But let's go ahead and take a look at kind of the base minimum specifications that you can expect on this board. Now, I like to always lay this foundation for you guys just from a perspective of that before we go into the board stack, you can essentially have a sense of what can I expect on these boards regardless of the model that I pick, right? So think about this essentially as the non-negotiable elements. Now, of course, ASUS being the industry leader in terms of motherboard design, you can, of course, feel confident that you're going to get a stable and reliable and performant board, right, with a great UEFI firmware. I think we have the best in the industry, but these are essentially going to be functions, features, and spec that you'll find consistently on all the models. So the first one is going to be PCI Express Gen 5 by 16 slot with Q release. The Q release based implementation is going to be fantastic. I'm going to quickly just show you a quick little demo of this for your reference if you haven't seen it. But the great thing about this type of design implementation is going to be that it just allows you to be able to remove the graphics card pretty much with depends on the model. You might actually have to depress something. And then on some models, we actually have an integrated design where, you just angle out the GPU and you can remove it very quickly. But let's go ahead and quickly show you kind of here how the Q release would work. So show you this. And here you can see an example of the quick release. And we'll actually show you this a little bit closer up on a secondary board when I put this under the secondary camera angle. But you'll see this is actually the newer generation where it's literally all you need to do is just angle it from the front and pull it out. So it's actually simpler than what even we had in the prior generation, which is pretty impressive because in the prior generation, it was literally just touching a button and pulling the graphics card out. Definitely made that installation experience so much easier, or nice if maybe you had to maintain your card and you wanted to clean it or do something along those lines. It definitely is appreciated. Let me know, anybody that has a board that has quick release, how have you appreciated having access to that feature? And also, did you appreciate that, again, ASUS has really, I think, benefited the industry, even with competitors copying these designs that we're innovating on, ultimately helping the totality of PC DIY builders out there. But we did it first and we did it best. And we're excited to go ahead and continue that type of implementation for this generation. So moving on from the quick release design, we, of course, have PCI Express Gen 5 M.2 SSD support with Q-Latch. Q-Latch, of course, is our tool-free design for your M.2 SSDs. If I actually show you really quickly here on this Hero has a modified version of the Q-Latch, which is newer. You'll actually see it's pretty easy. There's just a little latch right there. I can pull out the actual drive. The heatsink comes off, and this is going to be for the heatsink, but then actually even for the installation of the M.2 SSD. Let's see if I can do this at an angle. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it at an angle. Might not be able to get it in there. I can't see it, but we'll get it thrown in there on the secondary camera in a moment, and we'll go ahead and do that for you guys. But you can see it's quite easy in terms of just being able to angle in my heatsink right here. I've got a latching mechanism. It locks into place, and there I'm good to go, right? So that's a really nice option, and you're going to see essentially having this type of Q-Latch design for M.2 installation on the boards with a minimum at least one slot. All of the motherboards will have at least 4 PCIe NVMe M.2 SSDs. We saw quite a number of users out there that were noting that said that they had something like B450. Some B450 boards literally only had one M.2 slot. A lot of them had 2 slots, but again, at a minimum now here, you're going to have 4. And at least one of them is also going to be PCI Express Gen 5 support. So that's going to be fantastic. When we also talk about high-speed connectivity, all the boards will at least have one 40 gigabit port or the Thunderbolt port essentially on there with one USB-C. Of course, all of the boards will have an internal USB-C header. So by default, that means every board at least has 2 USB-C ports available to it and 40 bits connectivity. That's pretty awesome because the vast majority of people generally only have a 5 gigabit enabled device for like something high speed. So maybe like an external SSD or something like that. Or maybe you got something like our Arion or like our TUF Gaming external SSDs, which are 10 gigabits, right? But few people have really 10 or 20 or much less 40 gigabit devices. But let me know. What's the fastest external device that you have right now for your system? But it's awesome to know that you have essentially that future spec now, even on the entry-level models like our Prime. In addition to that, of course, Wi-Fi 7, this pairs perfectly, of course, with the latest generation of the ASUS routers that we have that also have Wi-Fi 7 support. We also have our AI networking technology, which is fantastic. There's some really robust software. I'll show this a little bit later that actually allows you to check your signal quality. It can actually guide you through how to actually make quick adjustments with your antenna to find the right direction that can give you actually better signal performance. And if you even actually have it paired with an ASUS router, it can automatically switch channels for you if you end up having a channel that's maybe a bit too crowded or maybe being overutilized and is affecting your overall latency, your ping, as well as the overall throughput, your bandwidth that's being provided to the wireless adapter. You get the Q antenna design. I absolutely love our Q antenna design. Do I have my antenna? Should be right here. Yep. It's literally so easy because it's a push fit design. We'll show that there, but just literally, if you notice right there, it just clips into place and I'm good to go. There's no screwing in the actual antenna, which is nice because it doesn't twist. It's very easy if you want to be able to remove it. You just pull it out and you're good to go. But it has a nice little depression, kind of like a little bit of a click feel. So it's quite nice, but it's a push fit design. Really, really great. 2.5 gigabits Ethernet. So of course that's greater than, of course, the standard 1 gigabit Ethernet. They also all do feature our land guard design. That means we actually have an optimized ESD diode that's actually built into the port itself to protect it from things like surges, spikes, and sags. A lot of people don't realize that a common point of failure historically amongst boards has actually been surges, spikes, and sags that go through the Ethernet port. They flow to the board and hit something like your chipset, and they can actually damage the motherboard. But for years now, we have been implementing these ESD guards across not only different USB ports on the motherboard, but also actually on things like the Ethernet controller to help to protect you and help to offer a more durable and reliable product over the years of time that you're going to be using it, right, in your build. Q Shield, integrated I/O shield, ProCool power connectors. Those are going to be thicker pins for the actual CPU power connectors and for the 24-pin power connector. It helps to reduce resistance. It improves current handling and ultimately just makes for a better, more performant type of power delivery experience between your power supply and your motherboard. So those are all going to be consistent items. But it doesn't stop there. We have actually another set of updates as well that would all be consistent for these boards as well. So let's finish rounding this out, and then we're going to jump into our first board. So you can see, what do you get on the remainder? You're also going to get, all of the motherboards are going to have a HD, so high definition UEFI BIOS. It looks really sharp. It looks really clear. It's fantastic to use. You won't want to go backwards. It also just, it looks more pleasing to the eye. You can fit more things in screen. Everything just looks sharper and clearer. I love it. We have a great feature called Q Dashboard. We'll show this a little bit later, but Q Dashboard is actually a visual map of all of the ports that you have on your motherboard. So this allows you to actually know where you have your USB 2 port or your M.2 slot or your graphics card slot. Everything is actually showing you that it's actively connected, and it gives you an easy access menu to be able to jump into that device if you want to be able to control or configure it. Let me see if I can quickly show you that one, because I just think that the Q Dashboard functionality is pretty awesome. So it should be over here. Give me one sec here. Yes, we should have it here. Yeah, here we go, guys. So let's go ahead and show you this quickly. So this is going to be Q Dashboard. So if you were to go into the UEFI environment, you'll see that there's an option that actually says Q Dashboard. You can click that button. And once you click that button, you're going to see that you have a full real-time, essentially, display for your motherboard. So this is specific to your motherboard. And you can see, hey, I've got all my fans connected. I have my memory installed. I've got my graphics card installed. I have this M.2 SSD installed. But then if you didn't know where to go in the UEFI to make adjustments to those different devices, all you need to do is literally click on the CPU fan. And once you click on the CPU fan, it'll actually take you to the CPU fan controls. So it's really quite, I think, useful, especially when you're first setting up your build. You want to verify everything. You want easier access. You can also see just how quickly you're able to then go from that Q Dashboard into being able to access that environment. So again, all of the boards will be featuring that Q Dashboard design. And heading back over here to our list, outside of Q Dashboard, we have AI Cooling 2 and Fan Expert 4, and kind of going alongside with Fan Expert 4. So this is going to be our advanced fan controls within Windows and within the UEFI BIOS. we now have upgraded this to an 8-point fan curve. And I don't even think you'll find this information on our product page. But in the prior generation, we generally had a 4-point fan curve, and now we have an 8-point fan curve. So this is really, really nice if you want to have more granularity to be able to define how your fans are essentially ramping up or responding to the temperature curve that you want to define, especially with now fans going up to around 2000, 22, 2500 RPM. I like having actually more points within a fan curve, letting me have a little bit more granularity. You then tie that into what's called rise and fall time customization that our boards have had for years. And you can actually then control how quickly the fan will essentially rev up to that new point in the fan curve. And that's really nice because that helps to kind of control how loud the fan might sound, or that veering sound, that kind of that sound that you might get. You can actually tune all of that. So that's a lot of great functionality we're introducing. Dim fit is an absolutely insane feature that I think a lot of you are going to really be excited about. I'm going to talk about it a little bit more when we get it kind of into the overclocking section. But the long and short of it is that we have built in essentially almost like a real-time debugging and modification kind of tool inside of the UEFI firmware that will essentially make auto adjustments to different memory sub parameters to essentially help to give you more options to be able to overclock. It can literally take a number of hours depending on the memory configuration. So it could run maybe as little as like 3 hours. It could take up to 7 hours. But the great thing is you don't have to worry about it. You could literally go set it a value, have it run through all these parameters, and then come back, when you wake up maybe the next morning, right? So do it on a Friday night, wake up on Saturday morning, and then you would be able to see essentially what values it's going to be able to define for you. I think it's a very exciting technology for those of you that sometimes might be running configurations that might not realize what is causing you to have an issue. Is it because you decided to mix two kits of memory that weren't really maybe designed to be mixed together, and you might have to manually set maybe certain memory parameters, but you don't know what to set? You don't know, should I be adjusting VDDQ? Should I be adjusting TFRC? Should I be adjusting this command rate parameter, right? Well, guess what? We're going to be able to make all of these changes for you and go through a lot of intelligent routines, and then be able to store these values that you can then actually go in and load after the fact. It's an awesome feature, an absolutely awesome feature. And again, shows the amazing innovation and the dedication that our performance team brings to the table when we're really looking at what we can do to make the build experience better for you and the performance tuning experience better for you. Safe dim and QDIM, this is just an enhanced design that we have relative to how we do our dim slot designs. It just helps to improve kind of the overall retention and the overall performance for the board. So that's a great addition. Safe slot, of course, is going to be the improved PCIe slots, which help to mitigate against torsion, especially with bigger graphics cards. This helps to mean that you can feel confident and comfortable that regardless of whether you do a 4060, a 7900 GRE, or a 4090, that the slots are going to be able to hold up and not have any issues regardless of what you put in there. QLED, of course, that's going to be a 4 LED diagnostic, which every board will have. So one for the CPU, for the memory, for the graphics card, and for the boot device, letting you quickly know essentially what's going on with your system to help you kind of troubleshoot it if you run into a problem. There is also an update that we call QDIM. QDIM, we demoed this actually in our last generation live stream, but it's pretty cool. This actually works before the post process, and I'll see if I might be able to demo it for you. I don't know if I have an immediate power supply right here that I can connect, but essentially the light will turn on the motherboard if you do not have the memory correctly installed. Now, this is very important to understand because this is before you go to the power on self test. The normal 4 LED diagnostic that we have, you're only going to get an error potentially once you actually power on the system and start it. But here, QDIM actually helps you to know that you actually physically installed the memory right the first time, because sometimes some people, they will think that they've got the memory installed, but maybe it's not fully seated, maybe it's not fully depressed, and so there actually will be an LED that will go off before the post even goes on to let you know, hey, you need to reseat your memory, make sure that's okay, and you can get up and running. And then of course at the end we've got ASUS Armory Crate and Aura Sync to be able to give you comprehensive RGB management, fan control, of course, profile syncing, and so much more. There's also a really great update that we've done for Driver Hub. This is a decoupled option to install all of your drivers. It's a very lightweight utility. It's about 4 megabytes. So when you first actually install your operating system, you'll be prompted if you wanted to install the LAN driver for you. Then there's a small little application. It will run in your web browser, scan your system, and then give you all the drivers you can download directly. So if you hadn't want to essentially install AC to be able to access and download all your drivers, you can now actually do that all through Driver Hub and also support optional secondary applications that are also available for your motherboard. And then from there, if you then want more advanced functionality for RGB management, for profile syncing, overclocking controls, things along those lines, then you can, of course, install and take advantage of AC. So that's going to give us essentially a recap of the minimum set of features, functions, and spec that we have pretty much across all of these boards. And again, I do want to renote that all of the motherboards have DDR5 specification support. There's no DDR4 specification support. Okay. All right. So eRock on Text says Driver Hub is awesome, legit. I like it, man. Yeah, it's fantastic. We actually did introduce this for our X870 based motherboards, and it is retroactively being rolled out to other motherboard models. So if you actually maybe have an older system and you end up reinstalling your operating system, you can actually right now just search for ASUS Driver Hub, go to the website, download the small little utility. It works really, really quickly, really easily. It's a great way to, again, be able to go ahead and just have it scan your system, be able to pick up the drivers that you need, and then you can just click the drivers you want to install and it'll take care of it. And it also actually offers updating notifications for you as well. So if you wanted to intermittently check the website, like on a weekly basis or on a monthly basis for driver updates, it can do that for you, and then it can notify for you as well. So it's a great addition that we have right here. All right, so before we get into the first Prime board, we've got a question. Is there any plans for BTF motherboards? We're super excited about BTF. Of course, this is an industry initiative that we've put forth out there with, of course, 2 different sets of kind of BTF ecosystems that we put out there with BTF Standard, or just BTF and then BTF Advanced. And then, of course, we did the TUF Gaming series of BTF, and then we had the ROG. But for right now, for the launch of Z890, we don't have any immediate BTF focus. But rest assured, we are evaluating, and we're right now kind of in the design and development stage. But when we have more to share regarding next generation BTF designs, rest assured we'll cover it on the stream, we'll cover it in our community, and you'll see more information about it in our social media channels. Okay. Let me quickly see. Hey, GPS Stuntman, happy to have you here. Fantastic. We have Ernest joining us as well. Fantastic. Happy to have you here as well. Let me just quick see here. Oh, so this is a good one. Tom is asking, is the Apex's ROG Dim.2 card, is it white, silver, or some other color? So I think you're going to be very happy to see the colors for that we have when it comes to the Apex, and also to kind of some of the accessories there. Even something as simple as the DRAM fan for the Apex has actually been matched to white as well. I know in the past some people had that kind of contra. I didn't mind it. For me, it wasn't a big issue, but I know for some people they wanted to have that kind of more uniformity and that more symmetry. So we've definitely actually even kind of taken it to the next level to enhance on some of those details. So rest assured, you're going to take a look at some of that awesome stuff. Hey, MP. Customized, fantastic, man. Happy to have you here. When again, the best modders and builders in the game, and we got a lot of great modders and building us joining us for today's stream. Very, very cool. All right, so let's get into the first model here. We're going to talk about the Prime. So here we're going to pretty much put the majority of the focus on the Prime-P. Not necessarily too much here on the Micro ATX, but this is going to be a fantastic board. But the Prime-B is going to be our starting kind of foundation for getting into the lineup. Again, from kind of a general kind of series and segmentation, really our Prime series is kind of an all-around offering. So whether you're going to be doing gaming, content creation, advanced productivity, science and simulation, maybe a little bit of kind of a combination of those things, this is a great board, solid set of specifications to get you started, right, without going too expensive. And again, keep in mind, we're still going to have Thunderbolt on here, so 40 gigabit connectivity. You're still going to have Wi-Fi 7. You're going to still have 4 M.2 SSDs that can be supported on here, the quick release. So it is a still solid, compelling offering, but it's only going to get better from here. But let's quickly take a look at some of the more specific specifications that we have on the -P. All right. And let me bring this one up here. And we'll bring it in here. And do this here. Okay. Perfect. Okay, there we go. So just kind of giving a little bit of a quick flyover on the board. Of course, you can see you've got one M.2 here, another M.2, another M.2, and another M.2. So you have 4 that are going to be on this board. You have one with a primary heatsink on there. So these are going to be essentially optional. I will tell you that I do love the layout choice that we've done on the Prime. So some of you might not realize that on some boards, essentially, if you stack too many M.2 slots immediately underneath the primary graphics card, you actually block those slots if you essentially have a larger base graphics card. So it's nice here because even if you have something like a 4070 Ti Super 4080 card, you would still actually have immediate access to M.2 slots essentially at that base. And then from there, you could decide whether or not you want to add in an aftermarket heatsink, or if the drive's not really in a thermal constrained situation where you don't have to add in a heatsink. It's not mandatory, really just depends on your drive. Rounding that out, we can see we also got the Q release on this board, the internal USB-C header that's going to be on there, 1, 2, and then you can see 3 and 4 headers that we have in terms of RGB, with 1 being a legacy and 3 being ARGB. I also will note down here, I think it's important, is you do have an actual your USB 2 headers right here. You have a clear CMOS header right here, a secondary USB 3 header. So 1 USB 3 header here, and you can see another USB 3 header here. And then in terms of chassis fans, I always like to kind of give that count right there. So we can see we've got 1, we got 2, we got 3. And then we have our AIO pump, and then CPU and CPU OPT. And then you can see you've got another one right there. So quite a bit of flexibility for your actual fans within a traditional system. And keep in mind that the output power on your fan header is more than enough that if you want to be able to multiplex 3 or 4 fans, you can easily go ahead and do that. Now, taking a look here on the back, let's go ahead and quickly take a look here at the back IO. You can see you've got 2, 4, 6, 8. So that's going to be 8 ports on the rear, including that USB-C, 2.5 gigabits, and Wi-Fi 7. Now, do keep in mind that as we scale up for the Wi-Fi 7, the more entry models are going to have 160 megahertz Wi-Fi 7, but you still get all of that great technology with things like our AI networking feature set, regardless of whether it's going to be a 160 megahertz Wi-Fi 7 chip or it's a 320 megahertz Wi-Fi chip. And if you're just wondering in terms of performance, even with 160 megahertz, if you've got a good Wi-Fi 7 router, even something like one of our more entry models that have recently launched, like the BE86, you would still actually be able to get over 2 gigabits. So twice the speed of a gigabit Ethernet cable you would actually be able to get with a 160 megahertz Wi-Fi 7 based controller. All right, so quite solid in that regard. So overall, that's going to give us a good kind of baseline for the Z890-P Wi-Fi. I'm going to lastly show you just a quick recap on the spec here for this model and a little bit of B-roll while I show this. So give me 1 second to kind of put these two together here, and I'll quickly see if there's any questions that we might have on that model. If not, then we'll get ready to jump into the next model. So give me 1 second here. All right. So you can see a little bit of some nice kind of footage right there. And if we take a look, in case anybody's wondering, you've got 14 power stages. These are teamed power stage design. It's optimized for transient response. Very good overall performance. Again, you've got PCI Gen 5 for that primary PCIe slot. You've got PCI Gen 5 in terms of that primary M.2 SSD slot with up to 4 M.2 SSDs that can be installed. That Thunderbolt 4 connectivity, Wi-Fi 7, 160 megahertz, along with 2.5 gigabit Ethernet, and then AI cooling and the AI networking. And the DIMFit, we're going to kind of talk a little bit more when we get into kind of some of the ROG boards, and I'm also going to have a little bit more of this focus section on AI Advisor. But AI Advisor is pretty awesome. I know there's a lot of discussion regarding AI and whether or not it can really provide you a real world immediate benefit. But the cool thing that we've really done with AI Advisor is that it uses an advanced language model system, which is indexing a lot of our service and support information along with a lot of our feature set. So the great thing is you can actually open up the AI Advisor application and you could ask, how do I actually maybe overclock my memory? Or how do I overclock my system? Or how do I change my fan controls? Or what do I do if I have this problem? And we can actually intelligently provide you accurate responses based on essentially prior responses that we've already confirmed through our service and support team, or through, of course, individuals that are experienced and understand these pain points, or how to essentially leverage a feature or function that we might have to get you out of the situation that you want, or maybe to just start something like performance tuning on your system. So it's actually a pretty compelling feature. I'm very excited about its introduction for Z890 series motherboards. And I'm also excited that just for a lot of users, it will allow them for a quicker experience to get more out of their system. We have a fantastic and amazing community, but sometimes some people, they have varying responses. Sometimes somebody throws a lot of technical kind of detailing at you. And maybe if you don't know how to interpret all that information, even though they gave you a great response, you might not really be the right starting point for you. So this really is, I think, very friendly, very easy to generally get a lot of the information you need, and then can kind of get deeper and deeper as we need it to. Plus, it can continue to evolve as we put in more information into it. So pretty excited about AI Advisor. All right, guys. So let's quickly see if we have any questions right there on the Dash P before we get into the TUF Gaming model. All right. And give me 1 second here. So wired hardware that's wild. I'm assuming maybe you mean the AI Advisor feature set. So hopefully that's going to be pretty cool. So Extreme hardware, is there a chance that the Z890 Apex will appear in a black version just like the Z790 Apex Encore? So the Encore was a follow-up model, right? Right now we don't have any immediate plans to essentially have other models outside of what we're discussing today. So if you're interested in the Apex, then you are going to get it in white. We will talk, though, as we get into not only the Dash E model, but also the Maximus models, that the DRAM topology design, which includes models that we have with things like NitroPath, are offering an unprecedented level of DDR5 overclocking performance that we, in the past, only really used to see on 2DIMM-enabled motherboards. So unless maybe you specifically want that even higher tier of even overclocking range that the Apex is going to be offering relative to DRAM because of those essentially two-slot design, you are going to be able to offer some truly impressive numbers right now on a 4DIMM enabled motherboard. And of course, you will have two boards that will be available to you in black. So both the Dash E and the Hero will have that NitroPath memory design, but we'll get into that a little bit when we talk about those boards. And yes, there is a mini ITX motherboard that we're going to get into once we get to ROG Strix. But next up now, we're going to talk about TUF Gaming based motherboards. Okay. So Scully's asking, yes, is the Z890 boards available? Yes. So let me go ahead and drop actually in the chat our landing page, so you can actually go ahead and take a look at that. That should be active, available for you guys right now. So if anybody wants to check out that information, you can go ahead and do that. So let me go ahead and drop that in their chat for you guys. All right, great. And that should be the main thing I wanted to go ahead and check on there. Okay. Great. All right, so let's go ahead and get started next on TUF Gaming. All right. And I'm going to go ahead and drop the link there as well for if anybody's interested in picking up the Dash P. In case I didn't note it, pricing right here, because I created this before it was finalized. So let me just go ahead and drop that in there for you. Anybody wants to see, it's going to be coming in at a price of $249.99. Okay, so that's going to be the Z890-P Wi-Fi. Again, I think that's fantastic. You used to, not that long ago, to even get a board that had 40 gigabits or Thunderbolt, you were easily talking about probably twice the price to be able to get that. So the fact that this one gives you that Gen 5 support for the M.2, for the graphics, the Wi-Fi 7, right? The new fan controls, the HD, the dim fit, right? All of those things, I think at that price point, that's a fantastic way to kind of be able to start the conversation, right? So very compelling. So let's go next into TUF Gaming, where we got the TUF Gaming Z890 Plus. So let's take a look at this guy. All right. And we'll go here, bring up our TUF Gaming, and go with the Plus is going to be the black model, and then we're going to touch on the white model. Okay, so let's go ahead and first bring this up, and then we'll do a little bit of a closer shot for the board in general. So here we can see it's got a really nice clean vector design language. It definitely has a durable kind of element to it. Now, right off the bat, some of the things that you're going to get that are going to be upgraded compared to the Prime model is, one, is you're going to have the easy, essentially, heatsink design, right? So on the Prime, you had screws where you have to unscrew that heatsink. It also isn't as dense. So maybe for those higher performing Gen 5 drives that might be in that, like, 14,000 megabytes a range kind of performance segmentation, this would even be a better choice, right? Because you have a more dense heatsink. It can help to keep those drives that much cooler. You still, of course, get the quick release-based design implementation that we previously highlighted on, the ProCool power connectors that we also noted on. Of course, you can see one ARGB header, another ARGB header, and another ARGB header. And you'll also still see that split design implementation, right? So we have still 4 M.2 SSDs, right? So 1, 2, 3, and 4. But again, even if you have that large base graphics card, you can still access those 2 bottom slots, but you have more heat sinks on this board, right? Prime only had 1 heat sink. This one gives you 3 heat sinks, and they all have the Q latch design. And this is actually a revised design. It's very, very simple to be able to go ahead and install your M.2 SSDs. I will show that when I put this board actually under the camera, but I'm going to give you a quick visual shot just so you can actually see how this new design works compared to the original design, because it is a little bit different. And I do think it has, I think, a merit. The prior one I loved. I didn't have any issues with it, whether it was actually securing it or essentially removing a drive, but it is going to even be a little bit easier for this generation. So let's go ahead and take a look and see how this one works. So we can see right here, we have the actual latch design. You pretty much just angle in your drive, you push it down, and it will lock in place. And then if you want to be able to remove it, you pretty much just push it out and it will depress it. And if you're wondering, we have actually validated this for over actually 100 times in terms of its actually durability, and it's over resiliency. So you don't have to be worrying about that it will fail on you in that perspective. So it's quite robust, quite solid. Okay. So TUF Gaming Plus there. And we're going to head back over here to our spec here. So again, you got your internal USB-C header, you got your front USB 3. SATA ports are split. I actually like this configuration. I'd love to know your guys' thoughts. Do you prefer them to be all grouped together or sometimes split apart? I think depending on my chassis layout and sometimes where I want to be able to run my cables, I appreciate actually these being split out, okay? And if we take a look here at the rear I/O, we'll get a little bit of a better sense of the totality of the value set on that board. So let me bring up its I/O. And here we can see. So you'll notice that the really big upgrade here as we go to more high-speed base ports that are going to be available to you. So you've got 10G, 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 right? And then you've got your Thunderbolt and 20 gigabits. So this is already quite nice, right? So you got 2 USB-C plus the internal USB-C, which would give you 3. You got the 20, the 40, the 10s, and the 5s, along with 2.5 gig and also with the Wi-Fi 7, and a more comprehensive analog audio output configuration as well, if you're still rocking maybe multi-channel analog speakers. For the most people that are out there, they're generally not. Most people are generally using, headphones or maybe a stereo set of monitors or speakers, or maybe something Bluetooth enabled or low latency 2.4 gigahertz, like maybe our ROG Delta headset, something along those lines, right? But overall, I think it's a very solid set of specifications in terms of the rear I/O. You also get that Q antenna design. And again, as we recap right here, this model does also come with that easy ejection design for the heatsink. Okay, so I think this is overall a really solid foundation for the board. I do actually want to go ahead and let me see if I have one other thing here I want to show for this one. Yeah, so if we actually get a little bit closer here, let me see if I can find it for you right here. Yeah, so down here, you'll actually notice that you have the CMOS battery. I'm a big fan of actually having the CMOS battery down in this type of position, because sometimes when you have it over here, it gets more easily be obstructed and then kind of more difficult to get access to should you need to replace it. But in most situations, you don't usually have to worry about that. Most CMOS batteries are going to run you usually about conservatively 3 years, many times over 5 years. So it's not that huge of a factor in terms of you have to worry about it. Let's quickly see if we got any questions before we go to the TUF Gaming Pro, which is going to be the white variant. Okay. Hey, MMHRB, happy to have you here. So GPS Stuntman says we need Q latch for all M.2 heatsinks. So the tricky part to that is, one is it would add a lot of additional cost, especially on kind of more entry boards. And also it took a lot of time to actually figure out the right contact pressure for this type of latching design. We actually found that for the consistency of a thermal performance experience, the actual screw-in design works really, really well in terms of ensuring consistency, in terms of making sure that you get kind of thermal pad to the actual PCB contact, and it just overall provides generally more consistent and better thermal performance for these higher speed-based drives. So on face value, it would sound like it would be fantastic, and it can definitely be a value prop, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's always going to be unilaterally a better experience. So that is something to just keep in mind there, okay? Hopefully that gives you a little bit of feedback on that side, okay? All right. Is SPDF of value? So somebody's asking about the SPDF that we had on the motherboard. So that's an interesting question, because It really comes down to, I think, user base. I think sometimes in the segmentation, we still some people that are using either like some monitors. So they have a monitor, and I refer to that as like a nicer desktop set of speakers, not a monitor like a gaming display, right? But they have a monitor, or they have a sound bar, they have some other device that they're using that actual optical out to be able to go ahead and feed out to. So that's generally why we find why we're trying to keep sometimes SPDIF, if somebody wonders, right? Will these work with 1700 AI mounting brackets? Yes. The CPU itself, of course, it has a different type of IHS, and overall it can be further optimized. So like when we talk about the Ryujin 3 Extreme, it's been optimized specifically for these new generation-based CPUs. It also has a very cool mounting bracket and a metal-based backplate compared to traditional designs, but you can use standard 1700 series coolers, okay? So you don't have to worry that you have to get a specific cooler essentially just for Z890 or specifically just for Core Series Ultra 2. In fact, the improvement in efficiency and power consumption and things along those lines means that you can probably be a bit more conservative in terms of the cooling product that you purchase. And the unit overall also is just going to generally be consuming less power and generally run lower temperatures as well. We have some slides on that we might maybe touch on a little bit later, but let's finish getting through on the TUF Gaming side. So let me bring up here TUF Gaming, and we're going to go to the TUF Gaming Pro. And did I don't know if I noted the price on the Plus, so let me actually go back here and I'll note the price on the Plus. And this is also available. I can drop the link there in the chat, but the TUF Gaming Plus is going to be $319, so actually $320 in terms of its overall price point. Okay. So now let's go ahead and take a look at the Pro. And where do I have the Pro? There we go. Perfect. All right. Let me bring this up here. Let you guys get a little bit of a look there. And I think it looks fantastic in this course white ID design. Really hoping you guys like the look on this model. All right. And just get a little bit of a drink of water here. Okay. All right, so when we take a look here at the TUF Gaming model on the Pro side versus the Plus side, the most immediate upgrade you're going to note is that you're going to have now full M.2 heatsinks. Now, the configuration is still going to be the same. This is 4 M.2 heatsinks. The other model was 4 M.2 heatsinks. You still get Gen 5 on both for that primary M.2. But you will notice that there's going to be a difference in terms of the heatsink layout. So I generally wouldn't kind of compare a white to a black board, because most people that generally are going to purchase the Pro are really purchasing it because they really want that as a white option. So I think we might do more of a comparison between the TUF Gaming Pro and the ROG Strix-A, because they're both white, and you can kind of see where maybe some of the additional value sets are going to be coming for the actual Pro. Now you'll notice there, you of course have the easy ejection design. You also have the revised, what we call sliding mechanism that we have for the M.2. So if you want to be able to put in a smaller M.2 SSD, maybe you're porting it over somewhere else, you can also go correspondingly fit those in there. And again, 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's a total of 4 M.2 SSD slots that you have on this board as well. The overall rest of the relative layout is going to be pretty similar. Let's go ahead and take a look here at the back I/O. And when we take a look here at the back I/O, I think this is quite solid. So again, you've got 2 USB-C ports. Those are going to be both Thunderbolt-based ports. And then you can notice there's no legacy ports. There's not even any USB 2, and there's not even any 5 gigabit ports, right? So one 10 gigabit, another 10 gig, another 10 gig, another 10 gig. So that's 4, 2 more right there. That's going to be a total of 6. And then we have 8. So a total of 8 ports, all high-speed ports. Plus, remember, you still got your internal USB 3 legacy connection and your USB-C connection, 2.5 gigabit networking, and then also Wi-Fi 7 with that Q antenna design, that AI networking support, all of that baked in there. So let me know, what would you guys think? Would you, if you're building a build, would you be excited about building something with the TUF Gaming Pro board? let's see here. So DB says, for very high DDR5 RAM speed, does the memory controller chill prefer only 2 DIMMs being used? So it depends on what you want to qualify as being RAM speed. We can't get into too much performance information today because performance is still under embargo. So you would have to wait for the more comprehensive demo and DDR5 overclocking that we're going to have at the end of the month. I can tell you, though, that we have some enhanced designs and also some specialized features like the DIMFET technology that I talked about, which can actually optimize the subtiming values and other parameters for your board if you're deciding to run something like 2 SPC, 2 DPC. So that's going to be like a high density memory configuration of 128 gigabytes. Now, most people don't realize that generally the memory controller and the board topology designs, they're designed optimally for a 2 DIMM configuration versus necessarily a 4 DIMM configuration. But there have been notable improvements, not only with the inclusion of things like with DIMFit, but also with newer boards that have things like our NitroPad technology, where you're going to be able to see significant more headroom relative to your actual DDR5 overclocking experience. Okay. All right. Jake Custom goes, white TUF is tough. E-Rock notes that yes, he would, right? And then we've also got another user telling us that the white TUF looks mind-blowing. I agree. I think it absolutely looks fantastic, right? Corsa notes the TUF and Prime is a good-looking board. I would agree. Yes, we're going to be talking about ITX in a little bit. As I noted, we're kind of going through the stack first. So we went through Prime, we went through TUF Gaming. Now, next up, we're going to be talking about ROG Strix. Okay, and ROG Strix will include the mini ITX on that side. All right. So let me go ahead and before I bring up all the Strix models, I'm going to just quickly put the Dash A next to the TUF Gaming, just so you can get a little bit of a vibe of comparing those two. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. ROG Strix Dash A, and keep in mind that the Dash A is always going to be our white themed board under the ROG banner, and also from just a excuse me, from kind of like a look and feel and general feature standpoint, I think it's a great kind of model to compare. So here we can see, let me know what your guys' thoughts. Which one do you like more, the TUF Gaming or the ROG Strix model, right? So again, side by side here, we've got this is the TUF Gaming. Here is going to be the ROG Strix, okay? So let's go ahead and take a look at this and see where the differences are going to lie. So the first thing is going to be excuse me, the slot layout design. This one's going to have a little bit more kind of that prior design where you have a little bit more flexibility for those secondary M.2 slots. As we noted before, even if you have a larger site GPU, there's a little bit of an offset design, so you could still install your M.2 based SSDs. The VRM is going to be a higher grade VRM. It's going to be more efficient. It's going to be more performant. But again, the boards are going to give you a great experience, stock or overclock. When we actually move over here to the rear, we're going to notice a little bit of a bigger difference. So let's look here. You got 2, you got 4, you got 6, you got 8, you got 10, right? So 2, 4, 6, 8. So you've got 2 more ports available to you on the Dash A than you would have on the TUF Gaming model. It also has a clear CMOS button in the event that maybe you're doing some more aggressive overclocking and the board doesn't bounce back and you want to reset it, or for whatever reason, you just want to be able to have a clear CMOS button versus having to short pins on the motherboard. You do have the actual clear CMOS that's integrated in there. And then you're also jumping up to that full 320 megahertz Wi-Fi 7. So it is going to be a higher performing based configuration. So there are a couple of other little things here that I also want to note. So give me 1 second and I will bring this up. And let me see if I have this in here. Okay, yeah. So the main items that I wanted to kind of touch on in terms of what you get when we go into the Strix lineup as a whole. And again, we just looked at the Dash A, but now we want to look at a little bit of the broader kind of spectrum when it comes to those models. So let's bring that up here. And we'll don't worry for everybody that's asking about the Dash I. We are going to cover the Dash I, okay? But when we go up from Strix, coming from TUF Gaming, right? What are we going to get, right? So we can kind of use this as the kind of the starting point. It's the ROG Strix Z890-A. One is going to be that 320 megahertz Wi-Fi 7. So that's going to be just be faster speed. What that would really mean, if you probably tested it, it's probably going to be maybe in excess of 2.5 to maybe 2.8 gigabits in terms of wireless throughput. You're also going to have the audio design. So all of these are going to have the same audio design. So this section where the isolated audio line is there, when there's then these audio grade capacitors and the codec, this one specifically has a more advanced amplifier. It's called a Savitech audio amplifier chip. So it's got a little bit more punch, a little bit more soundstage. If you use digital speakers or headphones or things like that, it doesn't matter. This is an analog based solution, but there is an improvement in terms of the audio design when you go up to the Strix ports. When you also go to the M.2 SSDs, this board is going to have 5. So even the entry model has more. You have 5 M.2 SSDs on TUF and Prime. Remember, you had a maximum of 4. This board is also going to have what's called a dual contact heatsink design. So I'm going to show you what that looks like right now. When I put the hero, I'm just going to put the hero under, and I want to show you what a dual contact design looks like. The VRM, which I already also noted, you're going to have on there. So let's go ahead and take a look here at the dual contact design. And see if I can keep my RGB lighting there. All right, let's clean that a little bit so you guys don't see that there. All right, that is pretty good. Okay. Okay, so here you guys, you can see the hero. Maybe just bring that down just a smidge, right? It's a beautiful looking display on there. It still might just be a little bit exposed. There you go. Okay. But any which ways, the dual contact design, when we lift this up right here, you'll see that I can lift this out. And the main thing that I'm trying to touch on here is that by default, you actually have one thermal pad underneath the primary heatsink, but then you underneath that have another heatsink with another thermal pad. So in some situations, you might have some SSDs where you might have NAND on the front and on the back, or sometimes the controller or different things can be on there. So here's an example of this M.2 SSD where we can see that we have NAND right here, but on the back, it's pretty sparse, right? There's nothing that really have to worry about too much. But when we take a look at this one, we can see that we actually have NAND here. And then there's also, of course, NAND here, and then there's the controller. So it could be in some situations, it might be favorable, especially if you have heavy load, to have that dual contact design. So when you go up to the Strix boards, you're at least going to guarantee having at least one of those dual contact designs for the M.2 SSDs. And also here, I can show that installation process. So, sorry, give me 1 second. There we go. All right, so you can see right there, and it just clicks into place. And pretty much if I want to eject it, I just pull it back, right? Locks into place, pull back. And again, if I wanted to pretty much mount the drive, I would pull back that film, then lock that in, and then I'm good to go. So very, very, very simple, very, very easy to be able to take advantage of that design, right? We'll leave the board there for a moment, but we're going to go back to it in a little bit to be able to go ahead and touch on more of the hero. But we're going to finish up here with the ROG Strix. So let's finish kind of going through the base spec here in terms of kind of the Strix model. So we're going to still continue on with the Dash A. So if we take a look here at the IO, again, we've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, right? If we compare that to the Dash F, we're going to see that the Dash F has 4, has 8, has 10, has 12, right? Now, there is going to be, of course, a difference here. Again, Thunderbolt, and then you have 10 gig or you have 5 gig connectivity or you have USB 2 connectivity. So depends on your kind of your preference in that regard. This one also has clear CMOS. This one also has clear CMOS. 320 megahertz Wi-Fi, because again, that was going to be consistent. When we look at the Dash E, the Dash E has just an insane level of IO connectivity, right? So you're going to have 4, you're going to have 4, that's going to be 8. Then you have another 4, that's going to be 12, right? And then you've got another 2 down there, at the bottom. So a total of 14 plus the 5 gig and the Wi-Fi 7. Again, on this board, 2.5, this one also being 2.5, Wi-Fi 7, Wi-Fi 7, but they're all 320 megahertz. Now, there's going to be some other differences in terms of the actual slots, and I'm going to definitely touch on that because the Dash E, I'm going to tell you, it has 7 M.2 slots on that board. So it's absolutely just stacked alongside that USB connectivity. So I think for a lot of you out there that you want amazing board in terms of overclocking, because it's got the Nitro path. It's going to have a great VRM that has really robust VRM heat sinks, right? It's got great IO. It's really an outstanding board and makes its value proposition, I think, very compelling, even against something like the Hero. But of course, the Hero is going to take things just that much further in terms of specialized features and functions. So let's finish rounding out here the Dash A. Give me 1 second. And I'm going to also quickly check and see if we have any questions on that before we go to the Dash F and then round out the E. So let's bring this in here. And I'm also going to touch quickly on the accessories, see if we got any quick questions that might have come up right there. I need the Dash E in white. Okay. No Gene. That's correct. We don't have a Maximus Gene for this generation. We do have a Dash Z890 M Plus. So micro ATX Prime board, a great option if you want to be able to have a MATX based option. But if you want like an enthusiast kind of overclocking centric or kind of premier micro ATX board, right now, not at this time. I don't know if we were going to see enough demand to justify the production, but definitely, you know, we're always listening. So if you can find enough people out there in the community to advocate for it, definitely send it our way, and we can definitely assess that and can kind of consider, right? Andreas goes, I don't know if you already answered the BTF question. Right now, no, we have no immediate plans for a Z890 BTF. We are under kind of design and development consideration for BTF, but right now, nothing to disclose, nothing to confirm. And if you're interested, just make sure to keep it tuned to our streams, our social media channels, or our PCDIY group, and we'll definitely keep you in the loop as we kind of bring those things together. So as you can see right here, I just wanted to note quickly on the accessories, you get, of course, the Q antenna. You're going to get these kind of little rubber bumpers right there. This just helps you to have a little bit more kind of support for varying level of kind of height or compression factor that might happen with some M.2 SSDs when they're installed. You get your SATA cables. Then you have some additional zip ties, and then you have right there your keychain, your lanyard, along with your nice premium stickers. Let me know who likes the stickers. I like the stickers. Our stickers are really nice. So there's a lot of people that really like them. But let me know: do you use the stickers or do you not use the stickers in your box? Let me know what you do with your stickers. Okay, so let's go over into the Dash F, and we'll go from there. Let me see right here. Don't have that. Okay. This model E. Okay, sorry, had it in a separate folder. I needed to pull that out. So here we go. This is going to be the Dash F. And I'll recap the pricing for you in a little bit on the Dash A, the Dash F, and the Dash E. Okay, but you can see here for the Dash F, you just pretty much go to black. You're still going to have those 5 M.2 SSD slots. You are going to see a couple of other little changes, though. You're going to have reinforced legacy USB 3 headers. So these actually have a metal housing around them, which makes them much more resistant against shearing. Sometimes when people are pulling out these cables and they're not reinforced, you can actually shear out the header and you can actually damage the board. It has happened sometimes with the fitment of those connectors. Let me know, have you ever had an issue either inserting or removing the legacy USB 3 header on there? And would you have appreciated having it be essentially more rigid and having it have something like what we've done here with our design? Okay, so in addition to that, of course, you got your CPU and CPU OPT, of course, your AIO pump header, the ProCool power connectors. You can see that you got the start button now on the unit, a little bit more performance oriented. Of course, large, robust heatsink as well with the quick ejection-based design for the heatsink. Of course, you have the Q Slim release design for the graphics card, and then a similar kind of isolated design for just varying number of items that you could be running on in terms of the board, right? And I think I have the I/O right here. Yep. So looking at our I/O, you can see clear CMOS. You got 4 ports, 8 ports, 12 ports, and another 2 down there. And this is still pretty impressive, again, with 2 of these being Thunderbolt, and then you got 4 10G that are going to be right there. You can see you got your 10G connectivity as well there. Very, very solid mix. And then you still have some legacy 5G, and then you still even have 2 ports right there. Wi-Fi 7, again, remember all of the ROG Strix boards are 320 megahertz versus 160 megahertz, which is on some of the more entry-level offerings. Okay. Let's quickly see if we got any quick questions that might have arisen there on that side. And I'm also going to put in the pricing here for the Dash A. So let me just do that. So $399. And then the Dash E is going to be $499. Let's see any quick questions that might have come over right there. Is the Apex, sorry, will the Strix board use the standard CPU contact frame, or is it a higher pressure variant? I think you'd have to clarify for me exactly what you mean there, if you can note that a little bit more clearly. Jeff, I'll be noting the ProArt in just a little bit. We'll do the ProArt after we do the Strix board. So we still have 2 Strix boards left before we get to the ProArt based model. And we did have some feedback in terms of stickers, and also somebody else that also uses the stickers, right? Okay. Oh, interesting. So are there any plans for boards with the IPMA expansion card like we did with the Z790 Hero? I would say right now that's tentative. We'll have to kind of wait and see. That was a pretty cool offering that we did implement, but you know, I don't think we've seen necessarily as much adoption as we would have liked. There are some boards that of course have remote control center express, which allows for a form of kind of out of band management that allows you to have control, but definitely that card kind of takes it to the next level, right? Because of course, all of the fans would be even directly controlled by that card. And then you can, of course, go in directly into the card and control the card from that level. So it does have a more kind of specialized level of functionality, but right now, nothing to detail in relation to supporting a card like that. Okay. All right. So let's go here into, sorry, we were, I gave the pricing on the Dash A. So that's going to be $399.99. So essentially $400. So let's just finish out here with the Dash F. Okay, and I had one item that I wanted to bring up here, so I'll just bring it up on the site. Apologies, guys. Give me 1 second. I thought I had an isolated slide for this item that I wanted to show. There we go. E790. Z890, excuse me. Okay. Dash F, there we go. Perfect. Okay. And let's bring that up here. So the main item that I wanted to kind of again note on was that we had the 320 megahertz. The M.2 slot configuration again is 5. So both the Dash A and the Dash F are going to be 5 versus, again, remember the Pro and the Plus are going to be 4 ports, right? And you also still have that dual contact M.2 SSD. I wanted to see if I had an actually image there that would show you the dual contact design on the board. It looks pretty much identical to kind of what I showed there on the Hero, but I didn't have that secondary image that I wanted to show, so I'm not going to worry about that. It's entirely okay. All right. So last from there, anything else that I think should be relevant on that model? I think we're okay. We do have the inclusion of the AIOC functionality, and AIOC, we'll talk a little bit about that at the end, because pretty much all of the higher end boards will have that functionality, but there's a dedicated microcontroller that is going to be on the motherboard that allows us to essentially analyze the quality of the CPU and then also look at the actual thermal performance of your cooling solution and then set actually targeted overclock parameters that are based on your CPU quality and also actually the thermal performance of your cooling solution. It's also adaptive, which is pretty cool because it means that essentially if your temperatures are become warmer over time, you can actually bring down the result. If your temperatures were to become cooler over time, say for instance, maybe you go from like a tower heatsink to like a 360 millimeter AIO, you can actually extend your OC targets. And you can even do things like define a temperature target. You can also have an optimism scale as well, which allows you to be more conservative or more aggressive at how you want to dial in the OC. There's also some other really, really cool things, like you can actually track your voltage, your temperature, and even the amperage that's provided to the CPU over an extended period of time, because it's all tracked on a hardware level. To do this through software would actually be really tedious and really complicated, because you literally have to open up logging software and run it pretty much in perpetuity for any time you're running your system. And then you would have to export that data and kind of average it out, versus right now, the boards that have AOC have a built-in hardware level function that is doing this for you. So it's a really compelling point if you want to be able to kind of look at your information over time. Okay, so let's go to the ROG Strix Z790-E. And -E is really going to kind of go to an elevated level in terms of its overall feature set. Why? Because we're going to introduce things like NitroPath and even more expansive I/O. So let's bring up this model here. -E. And I'm going to bring up actually two images for you here as we bring up the -E. So when we look here, this is going to kind of give you a little bit of a side-by-side. And remember, all the boards, the VRM, it is going to be upgraded as we kind of move up the stack, but in reality, it's not something you have to immediately worry about, right? Because all of them are going to be able to run stock or overclock. It just comes down to having some marginal kind of headroom and a little bit better thermal efficiency for how you kind of can balance out what you're distributing in terms of the actual VRM. Both going to be PCI Express Gen 5 for that primary PCIe slot, and they're both going to have PCI Express Gen 5 for the M.2 SSD, and you're going to see that they both support 5, and they both have heat sinks for all 5 slots. They both have the Thunderbolt 4 connectivity, right? And you can also see that you have, the Wi-Fi 7 with 320 megahertz, and then also the 2.5 gigabit, right? And then you got the AI Advisor, the AIOC, all of that stuff is going to be consistent. So it really kind of just comes down to whether you want a little bit of that additional I/O, whether you want that black variant, or whether we want to go into the E. So moving into the E, and here we'll take a closer look at the board shot, but the really compelling part is, first and foremost, of course, there's an upgraded VRM, but the storage, I think, is going to be the big one. As seven M.2 slots on this board, right? So you have 3 PCI Express Gen 5, and then you've got 4 PCI Express Gen 4 options. You then have 2 Thunderbolt ports on the board. You can see that 9, 10 gigabit ports that are going to be on there, and 5 gigabit Ethernet, along with everything else that we've talked about. So this is a really, really impressive board when you talk about the totality of its feature set. It's very hard to, I think, almost go, what more could you really ask in terms of kind of the core features, functionality, and specifications, right? So let me bring this up for you here, and we'll take a look and see if anybody has any questions on the -E. And from there, I'm also going to quickly touch on a little bit on the NitroPath. So NitroPath is going to be specifically only on the ROG series models, specifically the Maximus series, and then the -E model. The other models will not have the NitroPath design. So NitroPath is specifically kind of 2 things. It's one, there's actually a revised latching system. It helps to mitigate against kind of torsion or flex, so the modules themselves will sit more firmly installed. But actually where the real magic is in the inside. So the actual wiring is actually entirely revised, and this allows for a much, much better level of signal performance compared to traditional or essentially non-NitroPath designs. In most situations, what we generally find is this is going to be somewhere between about a 400 to 600 MT uplift compared from gen on gen. So you can imagine, let's say maybe I had 7,400 and maybe I couldn't get stable. Maybe now with this one, I can run 78 or maybe 8,000, right? With actually full stability. So it is actually quite notable. And I can tell you it's very impressive in terms of its overall flexibility at how it allows you to kind of scale out overclocking, if that's something that you find interesting or you really kind of want to push maximum performance for the system, right? Another item too that I will note down here is this little alteration mode switch. Some of you guys might be using a vertical mount. this switch will essentially just give you the ability that you can change the PCIe operating link speed. So if you want to go from like Gen 4 to Gen 3, sometimes some riser cables work a little bit wonky and you can have issues actually with the vertical mount, but this would give you that flexibility that you have the option that you can just toggle that. It will change the output configuration, and it can help you to actually get posting. And essentially then if you have to debug something else, you can do that. If you don't want to use it as a PCIe switch, you can also go into the UEFI and set this up as an advanced fan control, where as long as you have fans that are running directly to the UEFI via chassis fan headers on the board or CPU OPT headers, you can set a fan curve like silent or standard or whatever, and then set your multi-point fan curve. And this could be essentially an alternative to that, because the hardware controller gives you 3 options: high, medium, or low. So if you kind of want to all have your fans just linked into when it runs speed, you don't even want to go into the BIOS, you don't want to configure anything, you can just use that, set it to a fan control, and depending on what you adjust it, you essentially have, again, low, medium, or high. Okay, so that is something that the Dash-E is going to be offering. Let's go ahead and just give it one more kind of tour shot right there. You can see that really nice, big, bold, and bright dynamic RGB lighting zone that's on the left-hand side of the board as well. So Deviant goes is that, can you pull lanes? So you always want to check your manual information. No, you would essentially be doing some form of lane sharing, but in reality, users that worry about that, it's pretty much inconsequential, because the reality is even something like a 4090, even if you had it operating at a by 8 link, it's not going to be constrained. It won't affect its performance. We found even in our testing that the benchmark performance differential is generally about 1 to maybe 2%. And that is highly dependent even on sometimes the game, but in the majority of situations, it's not going to be a factor. So if you want that additional level of expansion, then it's definitely something I would consider, right? Currently have, sorry, I didn't see exactly what that question is. It sounded like something on somebody was asking about micro ATX. So if they can repost that in there, because I think I missed that question, I'll try to see if I can go back in and answer that question, right? Okay. All right. So that is going to be the Dash-E. Okay. So that pretty much covers the 3 different ATX-based models, right? The Dash-A, the Dash-F, and the Dash-E, right? And again, really the biggest differential is that Dash-E is just giving you so much more connectivity in terms of not only the M.2, but also the rear, right? But again, the Dash-E was very, very solid within that respect. So now for the mini ITX enthusiasts out there, let's go ahead and take a look at the mini ITX board. So we got the ROG Strix Z890-I. So this board is definitely going to be packed in terms of its kind of features and functions and its specs. So let's go ahead and take a look at this guy. Sorry, I should have it over here. Should have changed this folder naming convention a little bit. So one moment here. There it is. Okay, gaming Wi-Fi. Perfect. Okay. So let's go ahead and go, I think maybe with the center shot first. Okay, so here we can see that we have the ROG Strix Z890-I gaming. So there's a couple of cool things that we've baked into this board. So let's kind of go over those. First thing, of course, there is a very performant VRM. Again, it's not going to be an issue with any CPU that you want to go ahead and define. You're going to notice you got the ProCool power connectors there sitting up top. Of course, this is only going to be a 2DIMM enabled motherboard because it is a mini ITX based board. You have a reinforced USB 3 header right there, a USB 2 header that's been reinforced. You then have the FPS2 add-in card. So the FPS2 add-in card will give you some more granularity and flexibility in terms of different items that you might plug into it. So an example is right here. You notice you have 2 internal USB 2 headers, which normally wouldn't have on a mini ITX motherboard, but this one is giving out to you. Now, it is important to note that in some chassis, this FPS2 module might maybe run into a wall or maybe kind of affect something. So you still do want to kind of check for mechanical clearance. But in our fitment testing, we generally found that we weren't having any issues, and we favored, again, wanting to have the functionality of the FPS2 card. Now, you'll notice right here, the FPS2 card pretty much installs in via these 2 sets of USB 2 headers that are going to be, excuse me, USB-C headers that are going to be on the board. But you pretty much just can kind of dock it or remove it off, depending on if you need more flexibility, depending on where you're deploying it or what chassis configuration you're going to be using, right? Now, sorry, let me go back right here. When you also take a look and you see that you lift off the actual heatsink design, you'll notice that there's a lot that's going on here. So you see that you have an actual fan support. You've got ARGB headers. We do also have a secondary discrete camera there as well that's also been implemented. So you got two M.2 SSDs that you can install on this board. Not more than that, but again, 2 for the majority of people is going to be pretty solid. And when we take a look, of course, at the Hive, this is going to be an accessory that we started putting into our higher end mini ITX boards a couple of years ago. And if you're wondering pretty much how it works, is it plugs into one port on the rear of the system, and then it will give you 2 ports back. So it gives you one type A and type C. You have a power on level of functionality. You can also go ahead and do a flex key. Flex key can be used for a lot of different parameters, but you can pretty much define it yourself. There's integrated debug LED, because a lot of times when you're inside of a chassis, you can't see any LEDs on there. So our logic was, let's make the actual LED diagnostic routine more visible for the user if they run into an issue. So we put it onto the actual Hive. And then you've got an ESS Saber DAC and amp that's built in there as well, along with a nice, jog wheel, right, for being able to adjust things like volume. So a lot of flexibility in this Hive. It's not just there for kind of an audio output purpose, right? There is a lot of other usability element that is on this board. And I always like to call out that this board does also come with our Q connector adapter. So this is going to be nice where you can essentially run this to the board and then run out and be able to kind of take things like, your power, your reset, or your other leads, run them to that end cable connector in a more kind of easy or less constrained fashion, and then just run that other one directly to the header on the motherboard, right? And you can also see right here, you've got an ARGB and fan connection also option available to you. Let me see right there. Just getting an Extreme and an Apex. Yes, those are going to be fantastic, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. Corsa goes is that the Dash E is a big boy. It is definitely a fantastic board with an outstanding set of specifications. It might even be interesting to see for some people how they want to compare the Dash E versus the Hero, right? So Daniel is asking, so this is, so you had kind of 13th and 14th gen. This isn't really kind of defined as a 15th gen, but this is the new kind of chipset that's coming in now after the 13th and 14th gen series processors. So this is going to be essentially the Core Series Ultra, right? Arrow Lake, and then you have, of course, the corresponding chipset. So again, this is the transitional chipset moving from Z690, Z790 to now Z890, okay? In terms of that configuration. So yeah, let's go ahead and look at the IO configuration right here. I also do want to note that we made a little bit of some tweaks on the actual thermal design that we have on the Dash I as well. So I'm going to bring in a couple of images here for the Dash I specifically, because I want to highlight some of this as well. So give me 1 second here. And I will show also that FPS card, just so that we have a kind of sense of what is going on that board, kind of a little bit more comprehensively. Because I know that for a lot of the mini ITX builders, they kind of have questions on kind of wondering how it all plays out and whether it works well for them or not, right? Okay, so let's go ahead and first take a look here. So one thing that you'll notice here is that we really revised and we changed the way that we have the actual M.2 design implementation. So we made it kind of much easier. In the past, we had kind of like a different kind of stack design implementation, which, while it worked well, it could be a little bit more challenging in terms, I think, the installation process. So if you notice here, we actually have kind of this angled vertical design, and that will allow you to actually install your M.2 SSD. So you can see that you've got one here and you've got another right here. And you can see right there, there's, of course, the standoff. You put in your M.2 SSD, you get it locked into place there. So it allows for a very straightforward process, but then also can still be in alignment with the airflow targets that we want to make sure that we're adding in airflow for these higher speed drives, especially high speed Gen 4 and high speed Gen 5 drives. So if any of you essentially have had those prior generations where you had kind of more of a sandwich based design, this is quite different. And I think for a lot of users, they're going to prefer this in terms of just being more easily able to install the M.2 SSDs, upgrade it, swap them out, or do anything, because they don't have to kind of disassemble multiple layers that were sandwiched before to be able to have the flexibility of having multiple M.2 SSDs, but still also ensure that they're well cooled, right? So on the IO side, we'll do the FPS card and then we'll go to the rear IO. But this is the FPS card kind of up close. You can see it also has that alteration mode switch, which makes sense because a lot of the new mini ITX chassis are using a riser cable. These are going to be the connectors that connect to the bottom of the motherboard. You then have your two SATA ports right there. You have an over voltage jumper that you also have available to you, front panel connector, and then two internal USB 2 headers, because most of the time the USB headers on the motherboard, there's only one, right? And a lot of times you might need two, especially if you're going to do more RGB in that system. And lastly here, we'll take a look at the IO configuration. So you'll see that you have two USB 2 ports. These are going to be legacy type A. Then you've got your Thunderbolt 5 gig, 2.5G. Then, excuse me, you've got 20 gigs. So in total, you have 3 USB-C ports plus the internal USB-C port. So that's actually 4. So 4 USB-C ports. And then you've got your 3 additional type A ports, which are going to be 10 gigabit rated, right? So overall, a very nice, healthy mix. So 40 gig, 20 gig, 10 gig, and 5 gig, 2.5, and then, of course, with that Wi-Fi 7. So very, very nice in terms of the overall IO configuration. Hopefully that covers also what somebody was asking about in terms of the rear IO for that board, and also that we covered the M.2 installation experience. So Mattis says, what is the alteration mode switch? So I just talked about that. Pretty much you can do two things with it. You can use it to switch your PCIe operating link speed. So if you have like a riser cable, sometimes certain riser cables, they don't work well. Maybe they have signal integrity issues. Maybe there's EMI problems. There can be just kind of varying issues. It essentially just lets you change the link speed. So from like Gen 4 to like Gen 3, so that you can post and you can boot and you can use your system correctly. Because otherwise, sometimes people get stuck, nothing posts, and they have to take out the whole graphics card, then run to the integrated graphics, and then be able to kind of debug everything and get it to work. This allows you to kind of get that configuration to work and figure out if your issues may be tied into the cable. If you don't want to use that, though, you can also go into the UEFI and toggle that actual alteration mode switch to be a hardware level fan control. So any fans that are connected to the CPU or to the CHA fan headers, then they can essentially be managed directly on a hardware level with a high, medium, or low setting with just that switch. Okay. So, hey, Liquid House, what was the woe on? I don't know. Was it something on the Dash I? Hello, Paskowitz. Happy to have you here right there. And I think I showed the IO that we had right there. So, okay, let me go ahead and finish out that recap on the Dash I. And we're going to get ready to go to ProArt and then ROG. So we're going to finish up with the best, right? So let's get ready to go to there. Give me 1 second right here. And somebody was asking, in terms of memory, again, I can't kind of give you full information, but we're going to talk about memory in a little bit when we get to these CU-based DIMMs. In a little bit, I'm going to talk about this, how this also relates, I think, to Nitro Path on the Dash E model, as well as on the Maximus boards that have essentially this type of design and some other information. But being a 2 DIMM-enabled motherboard, it's, of course, going to have outstanding DRAM scaling because there's this less signal reflection. So if you even do look at kind of the base information that we're advocating for right now, validation is going to be easy for this board to be hitting in excess of 8,000 MT. In reality, I think you're actually going to be comfortably seeing ranges between even 86 to 8,800 plus MT in terms of your actual target values. So very, very performant in that regard. Now, keep in mind that generally the highest level scaling is probably going to come from needing a CU DIMM. So that's going to be different than a traditional UDIMM. And there's specific reasons why you're going to see higher scaling from a CU DIMM. So do note that. It is important to keep that in mind. Okay. Alteration mode switch. Oh, I didn't also note that, but let me go back here quickly, and I just want to touch on it. For the Dash I, I know showed you guys the visual there for the M.2 SSD, but the M.2 SSD, that is a dual Gen 5 configuration. Okay. So normally on most of the other boards, it's like you got one single Gen 5, right? But this one actually, it's going to give you both of these are going to be Gen 5. So you're going to have very, very high speed. And again, also why we want to ensure very good thermal performance, because Gen 5 drives can easily be exceeding, 10, sometimes 15 watts. And especially when you're kind of doing a sustained heavy benchmark, they can get quite toasty. So we really want to be able to ensure that they maintain good thermal reliability and stability, right? Okay. Okay, so let's go to ProArt. And I'll go back and circle, see if there's any kind of questions that might have still popped up in there that I didn't get into. And let's go with the ProArt right here. All right, and so before I kind of touch on ProArt, I do want to note for those that might have interest, keep in mind that we do right now have a pretty comprehensive ProArt-based ecosystem. So you are going to have not only a ProArt-based motherboard, but we also have our PA602, which is already out, and we're going to be shortly releasing a wood version, which will actually have black ash for the front facade as well as for the handles. It looks absolutely stunning. I would say actually in real life, it's a little bit lighter than this, but it is a darker color, but it looks really premium. I absolutely love how it looks on the PA602. And keep in mind that unit is an absolute monster for thermal performance. It has two 200 millimeter fans that are pre-installed, along with a thicker 140 millimeter by 28 millimeter rear fan. And it can also support up to 420 millimeter AIOs, although the one that we're showing right here is going to be our ProArt LC360 AIO, which also comes with Apex metal frame fans. And then, of course, we have our ProArt series of graphics cards, which literally go down all the way to like a 4060 class and then go all the way up to a 4080 super class. And if you're wondering, one of the reasons why I wanted to show this image first, and one of the call out points for the ProArt board, is that it has actually dual slot spacing and two PCI Express by 16 slots that are wired for bi-8 operation. Now, why would we do that? Is because for this and kind of intended target base, we might have people that are working in their professional applications like DaVinci Resolve, After Effects, different actual 3D modeling applications where they can actually benefit from multiple GPUs. Most gamers, most enthusiasts can't use multiple GPUs. And then even if they wanted to put a secondary GPU in there, a lot of the GPUs are too large. They're usually going to be like 3.25 to 3.5 to 3.65 slots. So that would actually overhang. And that is partly the reason why when we designed and developed the ProArt series, we created the max actually slot design was 2.5, because we always wanted to be able to ensure that you could essentially put two ProArt graphics cards on these ProArt enabled based motherboards. So whether you wanted to use it for for like acceleration within an ISV kind of recognized program, or something else where maybe you're running local kind of models, or you're doing something on those two GPUs, you can get a benefit. So that is going to be one of the most immediate differentials just on the ProArt board, is the fact that it has this type of specialized slot layout. So that is very, very important to keep in mind. Okay, so let's now go a little bit deeper into the board here on the base spec. So when we take a look here at the spec, you're going to see that you got 5 M.2 SSDs. So it's essentially going to be equal to that of like the Dash A model, but less than the Dash E. Remember, Dash E has 7. This one has 5. But here you are going to get Thunderbolt 5. So if you really care about ultra high speed, this is going to be kind of the best pathway to get the highest spec IO, because the only other board that has Thunderbolt 5 within the stack is going to be the Extreme board. So the Extreme has Thunderbolt 5, but when we take a look at the two other Maximus boards, they would still be Thunderbolt 4. Again, this makes most sense, I think, for this targeted segmentation of the market, because even the people that have Thunderbolt 4 are going to be Thunderbolt 5 are probably a professional prosumer that has like an external high-speed storage array or something like that, where they're using that type of ultra high-speed storage, right? In addition to that, you have, of course, the 20 gigabits, and then tons of 10 gigabit based connectors, right? And then, of course, 10G based connectivity on this unit as well. Okay. Now, when we take a look right here at the front of the board, there is going to be a differentiation compared to many other boards. This one does have a unified, essentially, heatsink design. So if we take a look at that total count, right, 5 M.2 slots, one is underneath this primary heatsink, which, of course, you can pretty much just click, lift out, then install in, and you're good to go. And for this one, similarly as well, if you wanted to be able to have access to those multiple M.2 SSD slots, you're essentially just going to remove that, and then you have those 4 additional slots that are available to you. So a total of 5 slots on this board, right? With 1 being PCI Express Gen 5 and those other being PCI Express Gen 4. Okay. All right. No postcode display. Yes, that's correct. For the ProArt, there is no postcode display, right? I'm looking for a really good PSU more in line with the 4080 Super. I would take a look at our TUF Gaming Gold. Our TUF Gaming Gold series is fantastic. We also have our higher performing units, which are going to be our ROG Strix Aura Gold, if you really wanted that. But it's kind of up to you. But those would be kind of my 2 recommendations. Let me go ahead and show you now the rear I/O, which I did that. Corsa notes that the ProArt aesthetic is really beautiful. And then Jay Custom goes, it's just when I was all about the X870E ProArt, this one looks even better. Might have to do a Noctua Chromax for this one, right? That would be really, really nice. Sneff also goes, is love this high class look. I do think it looks absolutely fantastic. Hi, Dev Trend. Happy to have you here, man. Thanks for joining us here on the stream. And again, hopefully I'm getting to everybody's questions. I'm trying to manage making sure that we're going through here and not staying too stuck on this. Again, if anybody has any questions that we don't get to, please make sure to consider checking out our PCDIY community group. We can answer any follow-up questions there. And if you guys leave your comments there post the stream, I'll definitely be looking to monitor over the next couple of days and see if I can follow up any questions there. But our community would definitely be a great space that if I don't happen to get to your question and you really want to get a sense of getting a better level of detailing, or there's a specific item that you want to compare or something like that, one, just leave it right now. I'll try to go ahead and get to it in the stream, but I want to try to keep things reasonably compressed, and I'll do my best to get to it. So with that noted, let's quickly finish just a flyover tour here before we go to the rear I/O. So again, ProCool power connectors. You have your dual CPU and CPU OPT fan headers. You have your AIO pump header, ARGB header. You have your, of course, your USB-C, your legacy USB 3, more chassis fan headers. You can also see that there's a dedicated clear CMOS button, which is not something that we usually actually implement on these boards. So that is something to be mindful of. The fan header connection as well is also a little bit greater than standard, with a total of 5 that is present on the board as well. So that does give you a little bit more. So let's look here at the rear I/O. This gives you an example as well as where I was talking about that you have that one large unified heatsink that once you lift that one up, you would have access to those 4 additional slots. And the other reason why I kind of position this one above the Strix is, remember, it's Strix by default gives us that at least one dual contact M.2 heatsink design. So this one also gives you that dual contact, right? So looking at the rear I/O, you can see 2 Type A, which are 10 gig, then Thunderbolt 5, right? So you get that even higher speed of storage performance or signaling performance compared to Thunderbolt 4. 2 more Type A ports, 10G and 2.5G. Now, keep in mind also for the ProArt series, we do actually offer our ASUS Control Center Express. So if you want a form of like out-of-band management, you do actually have functionalities available to you on the ProArt for out-of-band management, which you can do anything from actually check like how the system is working in terms of monitoring stat values, that you can actually even update firmware and some other cool functionality on there. If you're looking for more information, just kind of search for ASUS Control Center Express. We have some good videos online and some documentation to help you understand that. And unlike some other companies, for these kind of out-of-band management options, there's not an additional cost that you incur to be able to kind of unlock it or take advantage of it, okay? Another Type C port, a legacy USB 2 port, and then 2 more Type A ports at 10 gig. So overall, a really healthy mix in terms of the I/O configuration, which you can see is really kind of leaning towards the higher end specification side, okay? For the pricing, I've noted the ones that we do have pricing on, but take, for instance, like the ProArt yet and the Dash-I, they're not yet market available, so we don't have confirmed MSRP pricing yet, and I'd rather hold that. But if you check into the PCDIY group, we'll have a posted price sheet that has pretty much listings. But for the other models, they're actually already listed available on like Newegg and some of the other channel partners, so you can actually check the pre-order pricing. Take, for instance, I noted the ROG Strix Dash-A, that was $499. So when I have the price for that model, I will be noting it for that model, okay? Any other quick questions? It doesn't look like it again on ProArt. So I think that that wraps up the ProArt creator board for us. And let me just show you again here. I think somebody was asking about the IPMI. Again, it's not necessarily IPMI, but it is a form of kind of like out of band management option that we do have available on the board. And keep in mind right here, we do actually include something inside the box, which allows you to have a QR code to scan and activate essentially the Control Center Express functionality. So again, if you find this very relevant in terms that you want to be able to remotely kind of monitor, manage, update the system, do different things like that, then definitely make sure to check out the ProArt series. And actually, even if you had multiple systems, Control Center Express can actually scale so that if you have like multiple nodes, so you had like 3 or 4 systems, maybe you had like a render farm, you can actually access all of those systems as well under ASUS Control Center Express. It's not limited to only having access to one system at a time. You can actually access multiple systems at a time. Okay. All right, so let's get ready to, I guess, go into the very end here, which is going to be in the Maximus series, okay? So we're going to go into the flagship models, guys, and we're going to do the little bit of the tour, I think, on the Hero as the kind of the first one right here. And let me actually put the Hero price, because I do have the Hero pricing right here. So this is going to be $699 for the Hero, okay? So the Hero is pretty much like the industry benchmark, right? I think it really unquestionably year after year, when we look at what we do with our Hero, we always try to set the kind of the foundation to bring in kind of the most innovation, the features, the functions, the performance, the specifications. And definitely, I think the Hero is really compelling in this regard. I'll tell you from just my hands-on impression, I think it's the best built Hero that we've ever done. And that's, I think, a lot to say, because there's been multiple Heroes that felt outstanding, but I think just the fit, the finish, the execution over on this board is absolutely stunning, and it's absolutely fantastic. But there's a lot of really cool things to touch on that we have in terms of kind of specialized features and functions. So we are going to spend a bit to kind of go through this, and I'm going to first show the images, and then we're going to do like a flyover, because I want to go in a little bit more focus on this board since I actually have it right here for you guys. Okay, so we can see right here, we've got the Maximus Z890 Hero. I'm going to pull this back down so we can just see it a little bit more. Now, the first item is going to be that compared to the Strix models, you have just more aesthetic flair, right? One, you don't have any cyber text. It's going to be more kind of refined and minimal, but still definitely it has, I think, that kind of subtleness, that subtle kind of aggressiveness that looks really polished and refined and very performant. When you look at this screen that we have here, it's technically not a screen. You can't customize it in the same way you'll be able to customize this screen on the Extreme board, but it is what we call our polymo lighting display. So when I put this under the secondary camera, you'll actually see how it's dynamic and it changes up, and you can still customize elements within the software suite, such as, like, let's say, the color pattern. So you have flexibility in terms of working outside of the base display. Okay, so you're not necessarily 100% locked into that, but it is not a full display that you can pretty much unilaterally customize any which way you want. Very ultra large and much higher end VRM. All the components are upgraded, so it's not just the power stages, but the capacitors, the inductors, even the capacitors, they're twice the lifespan. They have lower and higher temperature tolerances. But again, all of the VRMs here on these units are very performant, so it's not really a factor. But again, if you're kind of concerned, you can feel confident that you're going to get kind of an outstanding, kind of best-in-class power delivery design. You do have your debug display on this one, so if you want that debug decoding, that's there. You, of course, have your CPU primary header, you have your OPT header, and then you also have your AIO header that's going to be on there. Start and flex key. The flex key can, of course, be mapped for different functions. You do have a high wattage PCIe supplemental power connection. Some people incorrectly think this is for like graphics cards or other things. It's not. This actual connector is specifically to be able to provide a higher level of wattage for the internal USB-C header. So you can, once you connect that, you can actually go up to 60 watts of power. So if you want to maybe quick charge like a phone or a tablet or like a Steam Deck or an ROG Ally or maybe even a laptop, you could do that from the front port on your system because it can support up to 60 watts, assuming you have a cable that's been rated for that. You will also see for this generation, we have 2 internal USB-C headers. This is pretty rare. We usually only would put 2 USB-C headers on like an extreme class board. But for users that might adopt into something like our Hyperion, this is going to be beneficial to them so that they don't have to potentially have some, front IO connections essentially not be powered or essentially not be usable, if that makes sense, right? As we move down here at the bottom, you're going to have a retry button. You're going to have also, of course, your USB 2 headers, a water pump header. The water pump header does have a higher amperage level. So if we got individuals like I think we had here, we had DePoets, we had Liquid House, we had Snef. A lot of those guys, if they're going to be running something that's going to be on the higher performance side, they appreciate having this water pump header that you have available. Plus, you also have the optional temp sensor, which you can map in for things like water cooling projects. Another legacy USB 3 header that's going to be on the board, more more standard chassis fan headers, and then your ARGB and your alteration mode switch, which I already covered, so I'm not going to recover the alteration mode switch. When we go over into the back, it has a massive backplate. That backplate does feel really good, just adds a sense of rigidity. It also helps to protect the board depending on kind of where you're settling it down, things along those lines. I'm always a fan of adding backplates, even though they might not have the most immediate kind of quote unquote benefit, but from an aesthetic and a feel experience, I definitely think that it aids. And there is an element that it reduces some torsion. So sometimes when you have really big, heavy heat sinks, you can have a little bit of flexing to the PCB. So this actually can help to kind of counter that compression effect that can happen with sometimes over torquing your cooling solutions, right? For the IO, you can see you've got 2.5 gig and 5G. And there, of course, all the 4 points in red for the Type A connections, right? So 10 gig, then blue is going to be in the 5 gig. And then you've got your Thunderbolt connectivity, and then you've got your USB-C kind of standing out there at the end. Wi-Fi 7 also in this model, like all of the other Strix models, is going to be 320 megahertz in terms of its overall speed. So outstanding. That can easily exceed over 2.5 gigabits of actually wireless throughput. So 2.5 times the speed of an Ethernet cable, right? That assumes you generally pair it up, of course, with a Wi-Fi 7 router. Right? So let's go ahead and take a little bit of a closer look at this board. And I'm going to go ahead and touch on some of the special features here, but let's just kind of get a little bit closer here. Let me adjust this. So there we go. All right. And see there. Hopefully do I still have battery there? Let's see if this works. Give me a second, guys. I should hopefully be able to see that display. Yeah, there you go. Okay. Yeah, it's a little. Let's try to go a little bit down there. I don't want to make it too dark. Okay. All right. So if we look there from the top, you got your two ProCool power connectors. So those are going to be thicker pins. Absolutely massive, of course, a VRM heatsink assembly with dual contact design. Again, upgraded inductors and capacitors and power stages on the board. You have the very large and dense primary M.2 heatsink here. This is going to be for PCI Express Gen 5. Now, this board will have 6 M.2 slots on it. Keep in mind, remember the Strix boards, the Dash E had 7, so it technically has 1 more, but overall, this is more than the prior generation. In the prior generation, most boards were generally like 4, like the TUF Gaming or the the Prime board, but now we actually have not 5, but 6 slots. There's an easy actually release mechanism for that primary heatsink, so I pretty much just angle it down, and then from there pull out, and then that's it. I have one then thermal pad. I would pop that down, and I already showed you how to easily eject this because it uses the new latching system. So just pretty much push back on that. It will lock it in. And then if I wanted to lock it back in, just press it down. And then I'm locked in. So that is going to be how the M.2 heatsink works on this one. This one will also actually have multiple dual contact heat sinks. So there's one dual contact heat sink here, another dual contact heat sink here, and another dual contact heat sink here. So a lot of the boards that usually only have the dual contact heat sinks are going to have it on one, but this one actually has 3. That's really only more of a factor if you're using, again, very large, dense, and very performant-based drives, and you have a workflow where you're really kind of hammering your storage, that you might want to evaluate that. For the actual Q release ejection design, I can actually show you what it looks like in real time, even though I showed you that video. This is the new model, which of course there's no button anymore. If you notice, there's no button to eject. So if I just wanted to put my graphics card in here, right there, and so if I went to go pull it from the back, it actually will not pull out. It's locked in. So all I need to do is just pull here from the front, and I'm just going to slightly angle upwards. So you can see right there. So it is awesome. So it does fully secure and seat the card in. So all of the boards either are going to have that latching mechanism. So they'll have a button that you would depress, like on the TUF Gaming model or the Prime model. And then the higher models, it says just a Q Release Slim. That's what this design is, where again, you can just install your item, and then from there, you just angle from the front, and then you pull it out. So it's really simple, really easy to work with on that side. Going back over here for the rest, right? Debug LED. You got your start button, your flex key, the dual USB-C that I already noted. You can also see then your legacy front USB 3. Now, on this board, there is going to be a connector that we have to kind of flip over here, and this one's going to be a little bit tricky for you to see, but right here, if you guys see this, this is really, really special. So this is actually a Slim SAS connector. So the Slim SAS connector is a PCI Express linked connector. And so the big benefit of what you have when you use this connector is that by default right now, the biggest M.2 drive you can get is going to be up to an 8 terabyte base drive. And the main reason why is this: if with M.2, you're thermally constrained, you're power constrained, and you're density constrained. The benefit of course, the Slim SAS connectors, you can use something like a U.2 drive, and U.2s, they're not power constrained, they're density constrained. So you can actually go up to 30 or even 60 terabytes in a single drive. So as opposed to maybe having to do like 3-4 terabyte drives, and you could actually just get like one single 12 terabyte U.2 drive, or maybe you wanted a 16 or 20 terabyte U.2 drive. And that also then only utilizes one lane versus, of course, on a board where you have this many slots, you would actually be using more lanes. So this is something that's new. We only have this right now on 2 models. So one is going to be the X870 crosshair, and then this one, which is going to be the Z890 crosshair. So that connector right there, let me just see if I can get that in focus a little bit for you. There you go. Yep. So that is going to be that Slim SAS connector. So underneath the SATA ports, you have that Slim SAS connector, okay? And you can access it more quickly if you wanted to, of course, remove the screws there from the heat sinks, but I don't want to do that right now. I don't want to remove the heat sinks. So that is something that's subtle. You might not notice it, but it is different on this board, right? Anything else to note that there? Yeah, the secondary front USB 3. This one, of course, is also reinforced. The alteration mode switch. And then you also have the split design, very similar to the ProArt. Now here we changed it up because this slot was a little bit more over here, and we moved it more to the bottom. And so in this situation, you generally probably wouldn't be running a dual GPU configuration in this, like I said, for modeling or for art or for whatever it might be. But you do still have more flexibility with this last slot being a true high-speed based secondary slot. So whatever you want to be able to put into it at a later stage, which whether it's a high-speed, RAID controller, or whether it's, whatever you might need that kind of bandwidth for, right? Maybe something like a 10 gig or 25 gig network controller or something along those lines, right? You just have more flexibility with what you can add in having that dual bandwidth based configuration. Okay. And on the back, you can see that really nice backplate design as well that we have on this board. And here I'm going to kind of just go into some of the supplemental items that are going to be applicable on the Hero, the Apex, and the Extreme. So let me touch on that. So give me 1 second here. See if we have any questions that might have been kind of coming up there to the Hero. Again, it's a fantastic looking board. Any quick questions right there? doesn't see, I don't think I see a question right there, right? So yeah, we actually showed this. You can go back and you can check the Z890-I. We showed that there's two M.2s, but it does have a revised vertical angle design. And so as opposed to the kind of the prior standard generation, which had like a sandwich stack design, it also is going to be dual Gen 5 for the M.2 SSD support, right? So Justin notes, is having played around with the Z890 Hero briefly, it feels more of a mini extreme than the X870 Hero with even larger heat sinks. Yeah, I'd agree. Like I was saying, I think that it is really, it feels really just premium. It feels really, really good in hand. So it's definitely an impressive board. So just some of the things that I wanted to kind of touch on here from just kind of feature standpoint. Again, we can't do too much because some of the things are kind of technically under embargo. But I want to show one, again, I want to re-highlight the Q dashboard because I think the Q dashboard is pretty cool. Again, all of the boards have the Q dashboard, but I'm going to just show it again really quickly here. So the Q dashboard allows you to just quickly be able to see a visual map of the board. And you can imagine that with a board with this much I/O, right, on 6 M.2 slots, right, dual PCI Express by 8 slots on the motherboard, you having that visual map that allows you to essentially see what you have connected, and then you can click a button to be able to access the submenus. I think this is a fantastic feature. Again, this is on all of the Z890 based motherboards. Now, some of the more unique things that we might have, one, the ROG boards all have memtest built into the UEFI BIOS. So if you want to be able to quickly and easily test your memory, you can boot straight into it and you can test your memory configuration, which is fantastic. Of course, all the boards have our AIOC technology, which means that once you install the CPU, we can actually assess the silicon quality of the CPU. We can look at the VF voltage frequency curve, kind of see where it sits in relation to all the other CPUs that we've assessed. And then we can also track your CPU's cooler performance. And then we could dynamically help to define an overclocking target for you based on that CPU quality and based on your thermal performance. The really cool part to that is also you can granularly kind of tune that up or down. You can have it be more conservative or you can have it be more aggressive. You can even also set a temperature target. And one thing that I love, that even if you don't use the AIOC function at all, is that we have essentially a real-time persistent monitoring element that is built in the UEFI firmware, where you can jump in and you can check to see what your actual average voltage is, what your actual temperature is, your average temperature, and the average current that's being supplied to the CPU. So if you kind of want to create a benchmark of checking it once a month, you could actually start to compile a really interesting data set that you have available to you. That normally, to do that, you'd have to open up utility, set it to log, and you would have to be running it every single time you run the system. But that could be super tedious and it could be quite complicated, where here we're tracking it directly on a hardware level because it gives us the flexibility to performance tune the system in a really interesting way, right? So the other item that I wanted to touch on is going to be this memory. So let me go back over here. This is pretty awesome. So these are new memory kits. These are from our friends over at G.Skill. These are going to be CK. So you'll notice these actually don't even have any RGB lighting on them. These are quite high speed. These are going to be 8200 MT kits. And essentially, there's a clock redriver that's on this. So you have your standard UDIM. So these would be a standard UDIM. These are 7000 MT or 7200 MT, something in that range. But these are 82. And the main benefit that you have essentially with that redriver that's built on is that you're essentially able to maintain a much more coherent, essentially, signal for the memory reference. And this allows it to essentially stabilize, especially at higher frequencies, a much better opportunity to be able to actually not only post and boot at those values, but actually be able to run those variables with much better stability and reliability. So CU DIMMs as of right now are only officially supported on this new platform. It does require kind of combination that the memory controller needs support for it. There has to be firmware support that's also enabled in the UEFI. There is a possibility that we could maybe backport CU based DIMM support to other platforms, but at this time right now, only Z890 is being designated for the CU DIMM support. And with these DIMMs, we're really starting to target frequencies of validation that are going to be really in excess of 8000 MT, which used to really be only a reserved territory for a board like the Apex. So even for me, like I'm a casual enthusiast, one of my systems, the daily drive, I had it tuned in at, you know, C76, excuse me, 7600 MT, and then with tighter timings. But with this type of configuration in these boards, I would comfortably be able to feel that I think we could be exceeding 8,000 MT. So that is going to be pretty awesome. Another option too you're going to have on this board is going to be the dim fit technology, which, as I noted, essentially when you install the DIM, you could go ahead and target in a specific operating parameter, and then you could have it train. And this training process, depending on the permutations of the memory configuration that you put in, whether it's, you know, single rank 2 DIMMs or maybe it's dual rank 2 quad DIMMs, it can actually go through a lot of permutations that can take as little as about 3 hours to as much as maybe over 7 hours, but it will create sub values for you to get that actual kit configuration to work more optimally, without you really having to understand that. Because there's a lot of people, sometimes they'll have 2 kits like this, and then they'll just buy another set because visually they like maybe how 4 look, but they don't realize all the factors that come in with it. Maybe then they have to manually set certain timings, have to maybe make other value adjustment points, and they're just not aware due to the complexity of RAM tuning. But we essentially have kind of built in a lot of advanced logic, and we do all of this before essentially the OS. It just, we'll keep going through a cycle test, put in these values, check those items, and then ultimately dump those out, and you'll then have an option to load in one of the dim fit profiles. It's very compelling. It's very interesting. It's very cool. We do have it on multiple models, but I think it's going to probably be most compelling for the people that run large, dense memory configurations and also have higher frequency memory, like what you would probably run on something like the Crosshair Hero. Okay, excuse me, the Maximus Hero. Crosshair would be, of course, on the AMD side. Let me quickly see if there's any questions that we have right there before I cover some of the other last spec right there. So with Apex and the CU DIMMs, I can do 96 to 10,000. So right now, it's a little still early on. We're still in validation, but we essentially are targeting essentially over 9,000 for the Apex. So the overall DRAM scaling performance, along with the new memory controller that is in these new Core Series Ultra processors, and then you account for, like I said, the outstanding PCB design that we're having, and then these optimizations that you have with, like I said, these new kits. And we are talking about, I think, reaching entirely new levels of realistically attainable ultra high frequencies, where I think in the past there was a lot more variation, not only based on the quality of the memory controller, but also challenges that sometimes users had at kind of dialing in certain parameters. So definitely for people, even just breaking 8,000 overall as a whole is going to be significantly better for this generation on multiple motherboards, not just even something like a Hero that has the Nitro Path design. I would say even for like models like the Dash E, which also have Nitro Path. Okay, and all of the boards do support the CU DIMMs. Okay. Any quick question right there? When will the support documentation for the manuals be available? Not until the performance embargo. So yeah, it still will be a bit of time. So right now there'll be some of the base information will be up on the website, but we won't have the full comprehensive manual information until, of course, the performance embargo. So that will be at the end of the month. So you'll have to wait out a bit more if you want access to that information, or if you have more additional questions, you can definitely go ahead and ask, right? Or also follow up in the community, right? All right. So one other feature that I also want to go ahead and just tell you guys that we're carrying over on the Maximus Hero board is going to be the DimFlex technology. So DimFlex, if you're not aware, is essentially just a, you have higher speed memory kits that are called non-binary memory kits. These are generally going to be like 24 or 48 gigabyte kits. These can be a bit more thermally constrained, and they're a bit more sensitive, that sometimes once you reach somewhere between about maybe the high 60s to about the mid 60s for the DRAM module, it can actually start to have kind of thermal variation, and it can actually have degraded performance. And so DimFlex is very interesting because it allows us to holistically look at the temperature performance of the DIM and then have a different targeted profile. So instead of you potentially having like a crash or having very degraded performance, we can actually have it toggle to kind of a different operating state where it could maintain that stability or work better at that targeted temperature, if that makes sense. So it's a really impressive and very interesting tool in terms, again, of how you can kind of customize can customize the targets that you want, right? So I think that's where I find it very compelling, because in the past, traditionally, a lot of people wouldn't realize that temperatures are something that they have to account for in DDR5, even though we had many models that would come included with like an assist fan. So like the Apex comes included with like an assist fan, right? The Hero also comes with a little bracket for an actual optional fan that you can also mount in to add airflow. And I can tell you, keeping those DRAM modules at a lower temperature helps to stabilize them and also extend their DRAM scaling. So it is something that you do want to be mindful of. So when you look at everything that we're doing, it's not just, of course, the Nitro path. It's not just the DIMM fit. It's not AMP3, right? It's our great auto rolls that we have, right? There's so many different kind of DRAM centric items that we're incorporating in that I think really offer a great compelling experience for a lot of users, right? So I think that should probably cover most of what I wanted to on the Hero. Unless there's something missing there, we'll go into the Apex and note that difference there. Is the motherboard rack wall mountable? I'm not sure what you mean by that. Yes, this is the new Core Series Ultra, right? So this is going to be Z890, right? Hey, Tom. Right now, there is actually no formula model. So in terms of the flagship ROG series, yes, the focus is going to be just on the Hero. Then we'll also have the Apex, and then we'll have the Extreme. For those CU DIMMs, if you heard that messaging that I was talking about for the CU DIMMs, right, where they have, of course, that integrated clock read driver, which allows for essentially that improved signaling performance, which allows for higher DRAM scaling. All of the boards will actually support this. And in actuality, this is going to be pretty interesting, because it also will mean that you're going to see better DRAM scaling even on more entry-level boards, because you're going to be able to decouple that some of the variants in terms of having that IMC coordinate with the DRAM module, and then the actual board itself will be kind of isolated and be able to be moved into the DIMM a little bit. So that will actually be interesting to see how like the TUF Gaming model will stack up in terms of the DRAM scaling, because definitely there was a scalable difference between something like the ROG Strix models and the TUF Gaming models in the past. Although, definitely if we start looking at these higher DIMM kit configurations, they definitely start to get a little bit more expensive. But right now, I mean, you can find 7600 and 7600 MT, 7800 kits actually for pretty reasonable price points, right? But let me go ahead and bring up one last item here that I wanted to show for the Hero. So 1 second. All right. Yeah. So this is I believe I talked to you guys that I wanted to kind of just show the AI advisor a little bit. So I want to show you kind of an example of how it works. So give me 1 second here. And again, this will be applicable to pretty much all of the boards. So I'm just using this as an opportunity to highlight it. But when you actually open it, again, this is using an advanced LLM. So that LLM will be referencing not only, like I said, data that we input in from performance tuning perspectives to feature set and functionality to also our actually knowledge base from service and support. So the reason why that is actually interesting is you can see that you can actually ask it a lot of things that make sense from a builder's perspective, or from a performance tuning perspective, or from a debugging perspective, right? And so here we can actually see an example that you can put like suggestions on, and you can say, hey, could you optimize my CPU performance, right? So maybe the user doesn't really know anything about how they can get better performance from their system. And so here we can actually then provide some additional kind of insight in terms of actually how performance tuning works, right? And then here are actually options that your motherboard has. So take, for instance, it'll give you the option, do you want to enable ASUS AIOC, right? But then you could also ask it other questions down here where it's like, well, how does ASUS AIOC work? Or how does it differ from manual overclocking? Or can I set something like a temperature target? Or do you have the ability to adjust the aggressiveness or the conservativeness of that, which we actually do with an AIOC, right? You can actually set it to, by default, it's at 100. You could set it to 105, or you could drop down to 95, right? This allows you to actually have a lot of adaptability in terms of how you want to approach the performance tuning. So it's really, really compelling. And this is actually really, I think, really exciting for our community members, because even though we have a fantastic space right now within our PCDIY community, we have over 55,000 people. That's not even counting then our like ASUS forums, RG forums, other places that we have that the people can engage and ask questions in. There is a lot of variability sometimes with how people respond to sometimes questions from builders. Sometimes some are really kind of courteous and insightful and take time to kind of kind of get maybe more information. But here, the system is not essentially going to be sometimes maybe a little bit curt with you, or maybe not kind of want to dig out more information, right? We can kind of really make it as niche and as targeted as we wanted to. And I think there's also, again, a voting mechanism in there. So as we actually get more data on the quality of the responses that are being provided and whether they actually end up resolving your inquiry, right? I think that this could become quite compelling. So we're excited to kind of kick this off for this generation, but really look to evolve this even further to, again, cover everything from performance tuning to debugging to building recommendations to a lot of other topics. Okay, so again, that's just a little bit of an example on kind of how the AI advisor works. There you could also see an example of how I was talking about the performance tuning. So the dim fit, that was that awesome technology where I said, hey, you can see how the dim fit works, right? Where it's, what does it actually do? Do you actually want to run it, right? How it actually creates these specialized profiles after it actually goes through permutations of changing sub-registers and variables for the memory from 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours, 7 hours, whatever, and then tells you, hey, you can go back and you can load this profile in, right? So any which ways, that is going to be the AI advisor functionality. Right? Paul goes, what's the difference between the dark hero and the hero? Right now, there is no dark hero. We only have the hero. The hero's dark hero is pretty much like just like a variant update. So it's like a refresh-based model. It's not generally a launch-based model that we'll have. So if we would potentially maybe update the hero, we might release it as a dark hero, similar to what we did with the Apex, where we had the Apex and then we had the Apex Encore. So as of right now, though, you don't have to worry about any type of dark hero. But in the past, what has always been reflected is essentially is a refresh model. So we had that original model and then we update it. So usually it's going to have some functions, features, or specs that will be improved upon compared to that V1. So think about it maybe more easily as a V1 to a V2, if that makes sense. Okay. All right. So let's go into the Apex here and finish out with the Extreme. All right. So, and if there's still a question that I missed there, you know, go ahead and drop it in and I'll do my best to go ahead and answer. Already a little bit over there, but I'm going to bring in first this kind of comparison that I have right here for you guys so we can take a look a little bit between the Apex. Again, I don't think for most users they would probably be comparing between the Hero and between the Apex because they're also white and they're black. But let's just kind of look at it nominally, right? From a power delivery and from a VRM standpoint, they're both outstanding, ultra performant, really in a top tier bracket, right? They also have very large, dense heatsink assemblies, right? That also have heat pipe integration. The Hero does have, of course, a bit of more dynamic ID design with the polymo lighting, where here you have just more accent lighting, but I love the accent lighting lines that exist on the Apex. They both are going to have PCI Express Gen 5. They are both going to have, a total of 6 PCIe, NVMe, M.2 SSDs, but the Apex does it differently, right? Because the Apex actually has this DIMM.2 add-in card. So the DIMM.2 add-in card will, of course, give you the option to install 2 M.2 SSDs and then just pretty much drop it into those slots that are next to memory. Now, some people don't realize that this has a really big benefit depending on your system configuration, especially if you're maybe somebody like a water-cooled enthusiast. Like in one of my systems, if I have a hardline loop, the last thing I want to do is have to maybe potentially put an M.2 drive in there because it might mean that I literally have to drain the loop, remove my actual card, right, from the loop, right? And then from there, lift up the heatsink, put that in there and do all of that. Versus here, if I had kind of a custom hardline loop that was all set up and I hadn't had those M.2 SSDs installed, but I want to install 1 or 2 as upgrades, I could literally just take the DIMM.2 out of the box, put the drives in, slot it into that slot, and I'm done. So literally the downtime is what? It's probably less than 10 minutes to just take out the drives, put them in there, put the thermal pad off, pop it all back on, and then click it back into the slot. Versus, again, if you had to access open slots that are on your motherboard, but you had a kind of more comprehensive loop that could be challenging to work through, you can definitely see now the advantage of something like the DIMM.2 design versus having the native on motherboard, right? 6 M.2 slots. So that is just something to be mindful of in terms of the differentiation. You can also see there's a little bit of difference in terms of the overall I/O spec as well on the unit, but they're both going to be pretty similar in that regard. Okay, but let's go ahead and take a look at the I/O spec quickly here. Also show to kind of what comes inside there. So here we can see what we have with the Apex. The Hero and the Apex also all come with flash drives. None of the Strix models come with flash drives, But if you guys remember already earlier, I talked about Driver Hub, which is that really easy utility. It's less than 3 megabytes that now you can just download. It installs your LAN driver, it'll scan your system, and it gives you a full real-time map of all the drivers you can download for your system. So really, really simple and really easy. But of course, an easiest option would probably be just use the flash drive, install your drivers from there, and then if you want to update after the fact, you can do that, right? But you get the Q antenna, you get your USB 3.2 flash drive, you get some additional, of course, standoff, rubber bumpers. Somebody that asked, hey, is the DIMM.2 add-in card white this time? Yes, you can see that the DIMM.2, the heatsink is in white, and also even the accessory fan, right, for the DIMM.2 and the memory right there is actually also going to be matching in white. So I think it looks fantastic, and I think the board looks great. I mean, just look at that Apex. I mean, just that kind of contrast in terms of that lighter monochromatic style, right, with the silver, the white, and then even that black. I think Brits really brings it all together, and it looks absolutely stunning. And I love the DIMM.2 implementation. I'm also a big overclocking enthusiast, so I love the fact that it gives me tons of granularity and tons of controls, and I have all of the DRAM options available to me, right? So that is going to be the Apex. Let me go ahead and see right here. Do we need different coolers? No. So I hadn't touched on it yet, but we do. We have that Ryogen 3 Extreme where the cold plate has been specifically optimized and designed. So this will be the first to market solution that's using the Asetek 8th Gen V2 EMA. So that's actually an entirely new cold plate, new pump. It's been specifically designed for the topology and the IHS and the makeup of the actual Core Series 2 Ultra parts. So that unit will be 100% good to go for essentially any of these units, but you can use any of the standard socket 1700 coolers. The bracket and everything else will work. You also have to consider that the overall thermal efficiency and the way that Intel have designed these parts overall, I think some of the cooling headroom requirements will be less critical, but it'll be interesting because since there is definitely a kind of gen-on-gen reduction in terms of the overall temperature and the operating experience, this could be an opportunity to maybe take advantage of that lower operating temperature and be able to see if you can even push for more aggressive frequencies, right? But again, we can't really go into talking about overclocking or demos or frequencies at this point because that is still under embargo, so it has to wait towards the end of the month when we do our actually like demo session, okay? So somebody goes, why doesn't the Apex have a backplate? That's a good question. And that's really because it was derived for an overclocking segmentation, right? So in the overclocking segmentation, because you might kind of strip the board down, you might do other things, the backplate can actually get in your way. It wouldn't be favorable. We still use a very high quality PCB. It has a lot of torsion resistance, so it's not an issue. But we do know that some people would like that, but it would ultimately be more of an impediment to some segments of the user who actually use the Apex in kind of the way that we intended to, kind of from like that absolute performance benchmark perspective, right? So that is the reason why you don't have a backplate like you do with the Extreme or the Hero, which those are kind of targeted more towards general enthusiasts. Of course, the Apex can be used by generalist enthusiasts, but a lot of the dedicated OC guys generally would not want a backplate on the actual board, okay? Paskowitz notes as I can confirm the DIMM.2 is great for water cooling. Fantastic. Okay, very cool. So Liquid House actually gives some cool feedback is that the AI advisor sounds actually pretty interesting. Can't wait to try it out. Very cool. And then we got one other question. Since the Apex has Nitro, the Nitro DIMM, does this also mean that it benefits the benefits on Commons to stabilize 8000 MT, at least SUDIM's widely available? So overall, the way you kind of can think about it is that Nitro path is somewhat similar to the benefit already of what you can get when you go to a 2 DIMM based board, right? With the 2 DIMM based board, you're helping to essentially remove some of the negative attributes that you have when you talk about signal performance by having essentially 2 empty slots that are on the motherboard, right? So essentially what we're doing is we're helping to kind of almost mirror making the board almost in a way kind of more like a 2 DIMM based motherboard than it is native, than it being a 4 DIMM based board. So in that regard, definitely you'll still have the overall best experience possible on an Apex board, right, with 2 slots. But I would say that the overall DRAM scaling is going to be notably better in terms of not only the margins of what you can scale up to. This is not even counting CU DIMMs, but if you account them for CU DIMMs, it then even increases, right? So what you can post, what you can boot, and then even what you can fully validate. It's definitely going to be very, very good, even on 4 DIMMs boards where there was probably a pretty large delineation between something like a Hero in the past and an Apex in terms of the scaling. Again, the numbers that the Extreme and the Hero are going to be putting up, and even the Dash E, because the Dash E also has Nitro Path, are going to be very, very strong. Okay. All right. So that I think covers the Apex. I think we're pretty good on that side, right? Did I show? I did show the rear I/O, right? Not. Let me go ahead and touch on that really quick. You got your, of course, your clear CMOS, your BIOS, PS2, which is really there just for the legacy guys in the OC community, right? You can see you got 4 Type A ports, 5 gig, Thunderbolt connectivity on there, 3 Type A 10G, and then another 10G, and then 20 gigabits there. So overall, I think quite well rounded. We've actually improved kind of Apex generation to generation to generation to have more alignment with something kind of like in that Hero class. We're definitely in the past from not only like a storage expansion side and some of the supplemental queue features and IO connectivity, it hasn't necessarily always been comparable, right? But in this regard, we have kind of tried to balance that out while still maintaining really its focus at being an OC-centric board. Okay, so let's go here to the last one, and we're going to go to the Extreme. All right. So let's bring up our Extreme here. And this will just kind of round out for reference the models. So there you can see, again, we've got the Maximus Z890 Extreme. This is going to be ATX. The Apex is, EATX. Apex is ATX, and Hero is also ATX. And I love the fact that the Hero is ATX. This actually gets overlooked a lot of times by some people that review or even assess the Hero. Many other competitors that try to kind of duplicate a competitive board to get against the Hero, they will use an EATX board design. But I think the fact that we're able to cram everything in that we do within a traditional ATX form factor makes this board fantastic, because it gives you a wider range of chassis configurations you can go with, even more compact type of chassis, and you don't have any type of fitment issues that you might have with a board that is trying to kind of be more in that kind of mid space between, it's a little bit larger than an ATX, but it's maybe not as big as an Extreme, right? So I find it really cool, again, that we're able to maintain doing what we do with the Hero class motherboard, but we keep it in actually that standard ATX based form factor, right? So let's look here at the actual Extreme. And really the big thing, I haven't really shown this much here, but I'm going to show this specifically because I think it has merit. But we're going to, I guess, show the prior generation Extreme, because it does definitely have a different look. And the biggest one is that we changed from that anime matrix display and we went into an actual full display, right? So let's go ahead and kind of do a little bit of side-by-side here, and then we'll look at that spec. But here you can see we've got the Maximus Z890 Extreme. And the first thing you'll notice is just that massive, large 5-inch display that we have on there, right? So this is an absolutely stunning display. It really does kind of set the board off and offers a very distinct and stylized aesthetic. In the prior Extreme generations, we did have, of course, the anime matrix display, which was really cool. Definitely really elevated the look and feel, but it felt probably a little bit more ambient. This does feel definitely more apparent, but we have really developed some awesome animations and stylized assets that look great on this screen. But of course, you can go in there and customize it. You can have custom values that you can integrate in, and of course your own content as well. Now, one other cool thing is that because of the way that the screen has been designed, and some chassis you can actually potentially have fitment issues. Some of you might appreciate this, and I don't know if Liquid House is still here, but I think that they might kind of dig it as being a builder, but maybe Justin as well, is that we actually have an offsetting mechanism with the display to allow for more flexibility at actually how it gets positioned, and to make sure that it doesn't run into sometimes obstructions depending on what might be in the periphery of the area. So I'll actually show you what I mean is that look over here in this section, and we're going to show you what's kind of happening. So you can see now that we can kind of push it up a little bit as opposed to being entirely flush back into the rear, right? So you can see a difference right there, right? So again, you can see we can push it in or you can push it out, right? And that just gives us a little bit more flexibility in terms of accounting for the variance of different types of chassis, and then again, what might be in the periphery behind it, right? And making sure that it maybe doesn't have an obstruction or doesn't kind of bump up against something. And then ultimately it just allows for a kind of a smoother and better kind of building experience. Now, the Extreme also is quite different than most of our other boards, where historically we don't do right angle connectors. We generally have never favored right angle connectors because they tend to have more mechanical conflicts. A lot of chassis don't line up well to usually always leverage something like a right angle connector. But we kind of feel that if you're going with the Extreme, you're going to do your homework to kind of make sure that your chassis can support that layout, that board, and its corresponding kind of cable routing configuration based on its overall design, right? In addition to that, when we take a look here, this one does have a large backplate on, just like the Hero does. You'll also see that it has the DIMM.2 add-in card, which looks fantastic. So again, you can also easily install those M.2 SSDs on this board as well. You'll see in the right angle connectors, you have pretty much all of them that are set there. So CPU fan, water pump, the ARGB, ATX, your 12-volt high power, and then of course your correspondingly the rest of the storage configuration. The PD power is pretty much just like what we also have on the Hero, that auxiliary power gives you up to 60 watts. So that will give you the ability to essentially fast charge devices. So like phones, tablets, laptops, gaming handheld devices. That's what you would be thinking generally if you're going to use that 60 watt power configuration, right? Now, this guy right here, that thermal solution is absolutely insane. We're going to go back in a moment there to just the prior slide, but I wanted to note that in terms of the M.2 SSD configuration, this unit is going to have the DIMM.2, so that's going to be 2, that's going to be 3, 4, 5, and you're going to have 6. So it's a total of 6 again that's going to be on this unit, but this actually has a heat pipe and a vapor chamber design. In our testing for some of the highest performing drives, we are seeing kind of wattage envelopes that are easily in excess of 15 watts. And we've had to do some really kind of interesting creative things. This also had to be done on the Hero motherboard, and I didn't talk about it, that when you have so many M.2 slots on a motherboard, some people don't realize that there can actually be a power constraint. M.2 by default is using 3.3 volt power. So we actually have had to essentially adapt the 12 volt power to then feed into supplement power for M.2 based SSDs. So if you actually have a large number of M.2 SSDs and they're actually all pulling power, you could actually be causing essentially an overdraw against your 3.3 volt rail, right? So we had to essentially leverage that you have additional power sources to make sure that everything works well and with stable and reliable operation. You won't have to really engage this or worry about it. The good thing is that we've kind of done all of this behind the scenes in terms of the design and development of the product. But when you look at the product corresponding product pages, that's what that M.2 power kind of marketing term means, right? Is that we've had to optimize essentially the hardware design to be able to complement such a high number of M.2 drives that also can pull a lot of power as well. Okay. So we can kind of blow it all away there, and we can remove the VRM heatsink, and you can kind of see everything that's going on there. You can see, of course, the dedicated heatsink for the USB 4 controller, right? We have the LAN guard messaging there on the ports. You can see the multitude of dual contact designs. Most of the boards that usually have dual contact are going to be 1 to 3, but you can see you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So 4 dual contact designs. There are a lot of specialized kind of switches and headers down here. I'm not going to watch too much on these. These are going to be very, very esoteric for really kind of only the benchtop scene guys in terms of kind of hardware level adjustments for things like the BCLK and SoC and some of these other things. I will note, though, I'm going to show you a pretty interesting slide in terms of Intel, that they do have a lot of granularity that they've introduced in terms of the overclocking functionality, essentially for this generation. So let me see if I have this here. Yes. So when we take a look at kind of what they're giving you in terms of flexibility, the boards are going to have a lot of options, not only within the UEFI, but on some of the hardware side. So we talked already about the more granular level of overclocking that's supported. Instead of having that 1 megahertz, 100 megahertz kind of interval, we now have that 16.67 base interval, which is fantastic. Dual base clocks, this is pretty cool because there's just more ways to go about performance tuning. Essentially, with kind of the modular structure that you have within the CPU, you could start to overclock certain kind of like ring buses or buses that are connecting to one other portion, or also do kind of one but not affect the other. So this is cool. It's kind of similar to how an asynchronous or an external clock generator works in that regard. We have more flexibility in terms of course, the DRAM that we talked about with the CU support, right, and the higher density support. So, and the P core and the E core overclocking is also quite interesting as well, that you have actually per core that you can go ahead and adjust the VF frequency curve, which is pretty interesting. And I think this could be really valuable for something like AIOC, where we could model out all that data, because to want to start to break all that data individually per core could be quite tedious for some people, and they might not want to do that, right? Versus maybe just being a little bit more like they're going to set some type of arbitrary multiplier or voltage, right, to align things in. So let's see right here if we have any questions that came up there on the extreme, and I'll throw out that last kind of shot there that'll highlight it over. So again, EATX, PCI Gen 5, right? Your 6 M.2 slots, again with 2 being on the DIMM.2 add-in card. The Thunderbolt 5, which is on this one. Again, this one and the ProArt are the only ones that have the Thunderbolt 5. The 60-watt front charging as well. The 10 gigabit LAN also on this one, and 2.5G. So putting aside, don't think I'm seeing any specific question. So Paskowitz, in terms of your question, that would be kind of, I would say, probably more of a question on the Intel side. If their memory controller and kind of the firmware states it. On paper, I would probably say yes, it would probably support those larger density configurations when they become available. But the reality is that there's not really there's not very many manufacturers that are making actually native 4DIMM kits, because the DRAM scaling and density also are both going up. And generally, in most situations, the vendors are generally prioritizing density aligned with a certain frequency target. So you saw this, take for instance, like with like 7,000 base kits, right? So this will kind of continue to evolve, but I would say, as always, we'll provide updates and visibility if we do release corresponding UEFI updates, which facilitate higher density memory configurations and whatnot, right? I don't think I see any other quick questions right there. So I think I'm probably going to let them go unless somebody else has any other questions. So for the most part, that pretty much wraps up all of the boards that we have here. And I know some people asking there on the pricing for the Maximus Extreme. So I'll go ahead and link that one in there. And I'll recap there for just the price on. So we'll go back to the Hero, right? So the Hero is going to be $699. Then we go back to the Dash E. The Dash E was going to be $499, right? And then on the extreme side, we go to, of course, the flagship right here, and that is going to be $999, right? So let me enter that one in there. So the last thing I'm just pretty much going to give you guys is just a little bit of visibility on the Ryujin 3. All right, and close things out. If there's any other remainder questions, let me know. But let me just kind of show you this. So this is pretty cool. This one will be launching in the not too distant future. Again, this will be the first to market Asetek 8th Gen V2 based design, where again the cold plate has been specifically optimized for these new CPUs. There's some cool things that have been added in for this generation with that Ryujin 3 Extreme. So let me go ahead and kind of show you some of the cool things you're going to see here. So one, I love that it's going to come with actually a metal backplate. So that just helps to mitigate torsion. It adds more rigidity, and it makes the installation experience nicer. So this is metal. And then also the retention clip mechanism that you have actually for the Ryujin 3 has been revised. So in addition to that, most of you probably remember already that the Ryujin came with Daisy. Oh. Sorry about that, guys. Let me circle back there. Accidentally removed my my power source. But the Ryogen 3 came with daisy chain magnetic fans, right? So this one will still come with daisy chain magnetic fans, but they will be even higher performing daisy chain magnetic fans. So let me get this over here. Now we can kind of show this. Reconnect my battery. One moment. Apologies. Okay, there we go. Got it back up. Okay, so let's see if we can get that in there. Okay, so here you guys, let's take a look here. So we got the nice little box. I've already done a little bit of pre-unwrapping. Okay, so for you guys who are referencing, these are going to be now 30 millimeter thick versus the actual 25 millimeter thick. Now, the prior ones were already kind of almost pretty much best in class ARGB performance on the market. They have outstanding airflow and static pressure. These offer just significantly even better static pressure and airflow performance. And of course, you have that fantastic element that these are daisy chain magnetic. So of course, you can just see how they connect together. Fantastic, makes it really easy for the installation experience on the radiator. And then we have the included, of course, connector. We don't use any proprietary controllers or anything like that, like some other of the competitors that are out on the market. So this just connects to a standard 4-pin fan header on the motherboard, and then your 3-pin header on the motherboard as well. So that means it can work, of course, with any manufacturer if you want it to do that. I also like the fact that means that, you know, for the fan controls, you can do everything from the UEFI BIOS if you didn't even want to use any software. And then, of course, you have your corresponding matched connectors. So there's one that's going to be for the male side and then the female side, and you can go ahead and make those connections on either side. So you can make it on one side, or you can take the other one, and you can see also right there, you can do it on the other, right? So very, very easy. And you can see just how it just snaps on right there. You're good to go. And then all 3 fans would be able to be controlled and powered via that one single cable. So you can see, again, you have your ARGB and you've got your 4-pin. So that is going to be the fans that come included with the Ryogen 3 Extreme. For anybody that asks, because I'm sure they're going to ask, are we going to sell the fans separately? No, the fans will not be sold separately. They come exclusively with the Ryogen 3 Extreme. And then on the cooler side, it's going to be pretty straightforward, but I will show you the new retention mechanism, which the retention mechanism I think is quite nice. There you go. And so one thing I do also love here on our Ryogen and our Ryu, our latest coolers, is that these models, they actually do come included with these kind of little insert guards, which are really nice to make sure that your radiator doesn't get damaged or bent. So you would essentially just kind of just pinch in on this, and then you can pull it out and you remove it. But until you're kind of ready to do that, you can leave that on there. You don't have to worry about it. And that does come on both sides. So you have essentially that protector. I'm sure probably somebody's done it where like you set it down and accidentally you bump it and then you bend the fins and then you have to get a flathead screwdriver and you kind of straighten them out. I mean, overall, the radiator still will work, right? But it is one of those things that it's just nice to kind of make sure that you're protecting it. Now, also from that connection standpoint, again, no proprietary elements here. It's very simple. So we have, again, one for the USB, that's going to be for the screen. And then again, for your pump, it's just from a standard 4-pin pump. So again, you can use that AIO pump header on the motherboard, and then you can use that single cable to the CPU header or to a chassis fan header or whatnot, and you're good to go. You'll notice that big, beautiful 60 hertz base display that we have on here, and this is also a magnetic housing, so you can remove all this to make it easier to install everything, right? That just pulls off right there. You can see, and then you have that nice big, of course, static pressure with that ring barrier fan design that we have that helps to provide airflow to the VRM assembly, also to the primary PCI Express Gen 5 M.2 SSDs. And the new retention mechanism right here, it's all integrated, and this is also metal, so it's really nice. So when you pretty much put that backplate on there. You go in there and just screw it all in. It really helps to make sure that the actual kind of torque experience and the overall kind of consistency and the uniformity of how it all gets dialed in is quite nice. And then of course you also have your thermal compound that's pre-applied. But the last thing that I guess I'll show you there from that Ryujin 3 is I think I have it in here. Do I have it in here? I don't remember if I have it in there. My ROG thermal compound. I might have not actually saved it in there. Oh, yep. I don't think I separated. I don't think I separated the thermal compound, but we do actually have an ROG thermal compound kit of premium compound that has recently come to market as well. So if you kind of want to put it all together, you can do that as well. But the Ryujin 3 Extreme, we haven't finalized the MSRP, but right now our tentative target is probably going to be coming in to replace the current Ryujin 3. So probably around that $350 price point. Again, you know, these are the best performing daisy chain magnetic fans on the market. This is going to be the first, of course, Core Series 2 Ultra Cold Plate that's been optimized, that big, beautiful display, of course, with that integrated VR assist fan. And this unit even also comes with a full 1-year licensed version of AIDA64. So if you want to be able to do your benchmarking, your stress testing, your comparison evaluations, all that stuff can be all done on the unit. So it's really, really cool. Again, this will be a fantastic choice if you want to pair that, of course, with something like that i9. It's going to be a perfect option. If you don't want to go that high end, of course, we have other great AIO solutions, including the ROG Strix LC3 series and the Ryu series, both of which actually have had recent price drops as well. So those are fantastic options in terms of performance, aesthetics. They also both come in white and black variants, so it'll be good to go. And the Ryujin 3 will also, for those who are asking, will it come in white? It will come in white, but I don't know if it'll be available before the end of the year, but we will be making a white variant just like what we do have with the standard Ryujin. So I'm going to quickly see if we have any last questions right there. And if not, we will pretty much close out the stream. And I want to thank everybody for taking their time to let us go through and be able to highlight some of these amazing Z890 based motherboards. Like always, too, we'll have a follow-up stream where we're actually going to do performance demos. Once actually the performance embargoes lift, we'll actually, I think there's a lot of really cool stuff. Do some overclocking with these guys. We'll actually do some more demo with AIOC. We'll do some stuff with the DimFit, right? Do live demo of the Q dashboard. There's a lot of really cool active demos. So we won't really cover too much, I think, on the boards, because most of the boards we've covered in this stream, and we'll look to timestamp this information. And you guys can also come back to check out in the community. We might also do smaller, just singular target board overviews as well, if people want to digest those as opposed to kind of the bigger stream. But we try to kind of tackle it all right here, so you can kind of click back and forth, hopefully get the comparison points between one board to another, the spec, the feature, the layout, and whatnot, and make it all discernible, help you ultimately be able to pick the right board for you, right? But let me quickly see if we have there what questions might have come up, right? So Snef, color of the DIMM.2 on the Apex, it is white. So if I didn't show the image, let me show it, because Snef is asking. I have to show him. One of my favorite builders and modders in the game. So let me go here. Apex. And yes, I can show you right here. It's actually on not just even the DIMM.2, but even the fan. So here you can go. Snap, so you can see even the fan frame and the assist fan that we have for the DDR5 memory, which this is really important. Like I said, especially you want to generally keep DDR5 DIMMs, especially at higher frequencies, higher voltages for those DIMMs underneath 65C, ideally even under 60 degrees would be fantastic. If not, especially for non-binary kits, when they start to get really high in temperature, they can start to throttle. They can still be seeming to work, but they can actually lose bandwidth. You can start to get more instability issues. But you can see right there, the fan holder and the fan is white. And then for the DIMM.2, you can also see the DIMM.2 is matched up perfectly to complement the look and feel of the Apex as well. So you are good to go. So it doesn't matter in this regard. You won't have to paint it or customize it. It is already set for you. Okay. So let me quickly, let's see if there's any other questions. Jas goes, is there black Apex print? No, not right now. Right now, just the standard Apex. If you want kind of the closest analog, I would probably consider the, of course, the Extreme, or consider the Hero, or the Dash E, because those at least have Nitro path, which also helps to improve the scaling. Plus, also you could have the consideration for the CU DIMMs, which the CU DIMMs also help in that regard to really allow for some very impressive DRAM scaling as well. Okay. So yes, you can go comprehensively be able to adjust the screen within our Armory Crate software suite. And if, for those of you that actually aren't part of our community group as well, there's actually a very big update that we'll have. Right now, we're what we define as being feature and function stable maturity. So it's very solid in terms of the overall build experience. But we will actually be launching our milestone release, which has been in work and development for over a year, which is AC version 6. We hope to actually release that before the end of the year, maybe sometime in December. So watch out for that. And that, of course, will be retroactive to apply to pretty much all of our products, as you know, AC right now is the cornerstone for all of our applications. Although, as I did note, we made a little bit of a transition to decouple, of course, the driver management, and now offer that within Driver Hub, which is a separate utility, right? I will have to follow up for that on the AIDA64 integration or the HW info. So stay tuned on that side. I do believe that probably for AIDA64, as we already pre-integrate AIDA64 as part of bundled item, and we already work with them on center integration. Same thing, even like on the Ryujin also has AIDA64 integration, that I do think that that should be possible, but I can't confirm for you 100%. So I would recommend you follow back up in the PCDIY community, and we can definitely let you know. Okay. All right. So I think that pretty much wraps up everything. So thank you guys so much for joining the stream. It's been fantastic to be able to touch base with you guys and show you what we have planned here for the latest generation of Z890 based motherboards, supporting the latest generation, of course, of Intel Core Series Ultra processors. I think we've got, again, a fantastic range of boards at a multiple price points, right? Going all the way down pretty much like that $250 price band for the Prime Z890P model. We have a micro ATX offering as well. We have a mini ATX offering. We have white, we have black. Again, we go all the way from that Prime P model all the way up to the Maximus Extreme. So 11 different models to be able to pick from across form factor, aesthetic, features, functions, and spec. There's a board for you. And then also, the reality is, you know, we are the #1 motherboard manufacturer in the world, and we support both Intel and AMD as well. So if you are looking at an AMD side of the fence, make sure to check out our recent live stream where we covered also the entirety of our AM5 X870 based lineup as well, where we have a fantastic lineup against 5 different series there as well, right? Where we have Prime models, we have TUF Gaming, ROG Strix, Maximus, and ProArt as well. So regardless of whether you're going to be going with the latest generation AMD Ryzen based part, or you're going with the latest Core Series Ultra part, we're going to have you covered. And again, if you have more questions, feel free to drop them in the comment section. We'll do our best to follow up in the video, and also make sure to go ahead and check out our PCDIY community. So with that, guys, take care, take it easy, enjoy the rest of your day, and best of luck with your builds. Bye-bye.